It's time for Twit This Week in Tech. Great panel for you. My car guy, Sam Abul-Samad, is here. My internet lawyer, Kathy Gellis, is here. And our 8th most popular guest, Larry Magid, is here. We're going to talk about the passing of a computing legend with some great stories. TikTok is still alive. And good news, Free File goes open source. All of that and more coming up next on Twit.
Podcasts you love.
From people you trust.
This is Twit.
This is Twit, This Week in Tech, episode 1035, recorded Sunday, June 8th, 2025. The droids are in the escape pod. It's time for Twit, This Week in Tech, the show where we cover the week's tech news. We've got an all-star panel assembled for you as usual. Larry Magid is here from connectsafely.org. Good to see you, Larry. Welcome.
Good to be here. Thank you.
When was the first time you were on Twit? You've been on for a long time.
A long time ago. And, I did something kind of fun. I took your spreadsheet, which shows all of your guests for the last umpteen years.
Yeah.
And I ran it through ChatGPT, and I'm the 8th most popular person on your list. It listed, I asked it to rank me because I'm very vain.
ChatGPT will tell you how popular you are?
Well, it'll tell me how many times I've been on relative to other guests. So... And it actually went back and looked at the entire.
Oh,
spreadsheet.
yeah. Well, that makes sense. Yeah, we like to have you on. Yeah,
so
welcome.
It was fun to be on. I love being on this show. In fact, I have to tell you, when I travel, I am more likely to get people to say, I heard you on Twit, than I am to say, I heard you on CBS News, which
that says something.
Says a lot about or a lot about CBS News. I'm not sure which.
I'm finding this a little bit confusing. Like, I've heard that voice before, but not here. I haven't been on with you before.
That's Kathy Gellis. She is, of course, a contributor at Tech Dirt, and she is officially an attorney at law, cgcounsel.com. And we love having Kathy on all the time, but especially when the Supreme Court's been active, which has been a lot lately because she is admitted to what do you call it? Lawyer in front of the Supreme Court.
I'm technically a member of the Supreme Court bar. This means I get to do stuff at the Supreme Court, like file briefs and in theory argue in front of them, but that's kind of hard to arrange.
Yeah. Well, you never know. If I ever have a case in the Supreme Court, you're hired.
Thank you. Okay.
Actually, you would definitely, I'm not even joking. You would definitely be hired. Also here, our car guy, Sam Abul-Samad. He's a VP of research at Telemetry and, of course, hosts the wonderful Wheel Bearings podcast and is probably the number 6th most popular host.
I don't know about that because I think the first time I was on Twit was probably about 10 years ago.
Yeah, Larry goes back to the Dvorak era. That's how long Larry's been on.
I'm actually ChatGPT because it might remember the spreadsheet I uploaded. Most popular.
Ask it again.
Sam is number 39. I have the list here.
Okay.
So Sam is 39.
Oh, okay.
Yeah, I mean, if you counted all my appearances on the Tech Guy and other stuff.
Yeah, the Tech Guy, you used to be on every month on the Tech Guy. So
actually, it was like every week.
Was it every week? Oh, it was. It was every week. I was desperate to fill time.
Micah Sargent is number 6 according to ChatGPT.
Yeah, because Martin Sargent?
Micah Sargent.
Oh, yeah, Micah. Yeah, of course, because he's
Leo
a staff
Laporte
host.
came on top.
I should be number 1, but you never
Jeff
know.
Jarvis is number 2. I'm jealous.
A lot of vacation time,
You love Jeff more than you love me. What can
No,
I
I don't. No,
Well, I love Jeff.
I'm telling Jeff.
No, don't tell Jeff I said that.
It's the Mean Girls episode.
Normally I save... I don't want to... This is a lively, fun bunch, and I want to sadden everybody, and normally I save the obituaries to the end of the show, but this one is too big a deal to not mention. Bill Atkinson, who was absolute pioneer in our industry, the 51st employee at Apple. He created QuickDraw, which is the Apple graphics primitives, did it for Lisa first, then Apple, created Mac Paint and HyperCard, which was in many ways a precursor to the World Wide Web. Yes. Passed away June 5th of pancreatic cancer, which sadly also took Steve Jobs and Bill Atkinson's mentor. I spent a lot of time...
And Jeff Raskin as well.
Did I say who I said?
You
Jeff
mentioned
Raskin,
Steve and then Jeff as well. Yeah.
Yeah.
Jeff was kind of one of the original creator of the Macintosh, actually.
Yeah. Well, it was actually Raskin who brought Bill Atkinson in. He had been a mentor of Bill's He was in the art department at the UC San Diego, and Bill was an interesting fellow. I was very lucky to spend quite a few hours with him. I think one day we spent 5 hours talking and turned it into a couple of triangulation episodes. But he was a very creative guy. His original work was in brain science, and in fact, he was working on his PhD in brain science when Jeff Raskin said, "You got to come to Apple." In fact, I'm going to let Bill complete the story. This is from one of our conversations back in 2018.
Right. And he didn't take no for an answer. He sent me a round-trip airfare with a little note saying, "No strings attached, just visit for a weekend." And my dad lived in Los Gatos, not too far from Apple. So I figured, okay, I'll come down for a weekend.
Apple's pretty small this time, about 30 employees.
Yeah. And Steve Jobs, I don't know what Jeff said to him, but Steve dedicated one entire day to recruiting me. He took me around to everybody that worked at Apple. There were 30 people. They seemed like they were having fun. They were working on interesting things. And their heart was in the right place. They wanted to do something good in the world. But that wasn't enough. I had to finish. Consciousness is pretty amazing frontier, and I wanted to work on that. But toward the end of the day, Steve took me aside and he said, when you read about some hot new technology, that really was created 2 years prior. There's a lag between the time when something's created and the time when it's available to the public. And if you want to affect the world, you have to get ahead of that lag. And come to Apple, where we're inventing the future. You can help to invent the future and affect millions of people's lives. And then, just as I was leaving, he gave me this visual. He said, think how fun it is to surf on the front edge of a wave, and how not fun to dog paddle on the tail end of the same wave. And I kind of stuck in my craw, and
he was a good salesman, man, I tell you.
2 weeks later, I had quit my neuroscience program.
Wow.
Never finished my degree.
Wow.
I had moved from up in Seattle down to Silicon Valley, which when I left was Santa Clara Valley.
Right. It was prune trees everywhere.
Right.
Yeah.
And I was working at Apple 2 weeks after his...
That's a brave thing. How did you just... Amazing stories from Bill Atkinson. Mm-hmm. He wrote Hypercard after an acid trip. A lot of those stories are, on our page, if you search for Bill Atkinson, there's, I think, 5 shows that we did with Bill. Another place to go is Andy Hertzfeld's folklore.org, where many of the stories about the original Macintosh team are. In fact, he tells a great story about Bill and QuickDraw, which was, as I said, the graphics primitives, very important to both the Lisa, and the Mac's predecessor, and the Macintosh. And to this day, brilliant. He wanted to draw ovals and circles very quickly, which is hard to do on the Mac at that time because its processor didn't have floating point math. It only did integers. And circles need square roots, pi r squared. Bill came up with a way to do the circle calculation with integers, just addition and subtraction, not even multiplication or division. And very proudly came in to show the team, because he worked at home, he programmed at home. And he showed them drawings, showed the Lisa drawing circles. Hertzfeld writes, but something was bothering Steve Jobs. Well, circles and ovals are good, but how about drawing rectangles with rounded corners? Can we do that now too? To which Bill replied, no, there's no way to do that. In fact, it'd be really hard to do. I don't think we really need it. Hertzfeld says, I think Bill was a little miffed that Steve wasn't raving over the fast ovals and still wanted more. Steve got more intense. Rectangles with rounded corners are everywhere. Just look at this room. Sure enough, there were lots of them. The whiteboard, the desks, the tables. Then he pointed out the window. Look outside. There's even more. Practically everywhere you look. He even persuaded Bill to take a walk around the block with him, pointing at every rectangle with rounded corners he could find. When Steve and Bill passed a no parking sign, and you know how they look with rounded corners, it did the trick. Okay, I give up, Bill pleaded. I'll see if it's as hard as I thought. He went back home to work on it. The next afternoon, he came back with a big smile on his face. The demo was now drawing rectangles with beautifully rounded corners, blisteringly fast, almost at the speed of plain rectangles. And if you think about it, to this day, computer interfaces, if they were just square rectangles, would be ugly. They would be blocky. rounded rectangles did transform the interface.
Yeah.
And Bill did so many things like that. I don't know why this wouldn't hit me really hard. Maybe because I felt a real kinship with Bill, but I think also because it is in some ways the end of an era. It's been more than 40 years since Bill did that seminal work that made the Macintosh what it is today, what computing is today. That's a long time. Feels like yesterday, the first time I saw a Mac. Feels like
It also
yesterday.
reminds us that we're getting older.
Yeah. He was only 5 years older than me when
He was
he
younger
passed.
than me.
Yeah. But what a loss.
There's a rounded window, a rounded rectangle.
Yeah. Everywhere you see it, rounded
I minimized the
rectangles.
window just to see my own.
Yeah. He became a photographer later in life.
Beautiful, beautiful work.
Amazing work.
Worth
He would
going
do
to that website. It's just
Yeah.
gorgeous.
Oh, go see it. Yeah, BillAtkinson.com. He did rounded rectangles. He did thin sections of rocks and minerals and stuff. He gave me some, which I treasure. A really beautiful, sweet, brilliant man. John Gruber said perhaps the best programmer of all time. Certainly, we're very lucky to have had him. So. I thought I'd start the show just with a little
I knew him
tribute to Bill.
then. I have not seen him in 30 years, but I remember him as just being a very charming, energetic guy.
You see how different he looked. He had long hair and a big Viva Zapata mustache and bright blue eyes. And apparently he was. I didn't know him in that day. I did know Andy a little bit, but he didn't know Atkinson. Apparently, very energetic, very passionate.
Yeah.
He, when we were interviewing him, at the beginning, his wife, Sue, was very ill and passing, and he was caring for her, and it was very hard. And then later, when I interviewed him some years later, after she passed, he said he did an ayahuasca ceremony and talked with her, and she gave him permission to move on. He did, in fact, find another wife who he loved deeply, and he was surrounded by his family when he passed after a somewhat long illness. So Bill Atkinson, R.I.P., and thank you for all the round rects. We
and Hypercard, boy, that was a breakthrough.
Hypercard, amazing.
I remember having it, and I actually helped write a book about it. It was.
Oh, did you?
Yeah, I've got it on my shelf here, but it was just an amazing. The fact that you could do that, and you're absolutely right. I mean, the World Wide Web. I mean, I give a lot of credit to Sir Bernard-Lee, but. I really think that Atkinson gets the real credit for it, for having.
If at the time we'd had the internet, it would have been the World Wide Web, but we didn't. And Berners-Lee obviously was inspired by what Hypercard was. If you'd never used it, maybe it wouldn't come clear to you. But it was amazing. I remember I used it to plan my radio show in the mid '80s. My dad used it to do a history of Darwin and sailing in the Beagle and discovering evolution and so forth. So many Hypercard stacks, and this was before the internet. This is before.
And it also, when the CD-ROM came around, I can't remember what they called it then, but CDs all had this kind of interactive, clicking and moving from one spot to another. It wasn't called Hypercard, but it was very similar.
Yeah. Oh yeah. I think this whole hyperlinking thing really dates back.
Actually, I meant the DVD
Hypercard.
more than the CD. But the point is that.
Right. Anyway, I've been sad for the last 24 hours.
Yeah.
I got an email from John Slanina, our studio engineer, with a bunch of pictures of Bill at the studio, and I said, "Oh, that's nice." I don't know why he sent me that. Then I saw the news, and I thought, "Oh, I'm very sad, very, very sad." All right, now we can move on to some jolly things. Well, not really. And I'm glad you're here, Kathy. There's a lot of court news. OpenAI has been ordered to preserve all the ChatGPT logs, including deleted chats. This is in the New York Times versus OpenAI lawsuit. Frankly, I'm stunned. OpenAI argued the order really invaded the privacy. They warned the privacy of hundreds of millions of ChatGPT users globally is at risk. And it's true because, it will by default remember your chats, but there's a button to delete them.
Yes.
Apparently, OpenAI has everything that was intentionally deleted. I don't know. That's speculation.
Scares me because I use it for medical research, and I do delete some data that I give it.
Yeah.
And I always assume that it was gone.
I think they start to risk issues with compliance with anybody's privacy laws if they say it is and it isn't, or if they're required to delete it and it's not. I think this is an order that there's clearly tension here. I don't know the details enough to know exactly where the specific legal pain points are, but conceptually this is a problem because you have some regulatory pressure saying, get rid of this stuff. The user has just told you to get rid of it. And then you have another form of regulatory pressure saying you must keep it and you can't please both masters at the same time. And
well,
I think this is the tip of the iceberg of this type of tension.
Now OpenAI says we are retaining all content indefinitely going forward, based on speculation that the news plaintiffs might find something that supports their case. They say this was rushed. This has really nothing to do with OpenAI. New York Times, claims OpenAI ingested the New York Times content illegally. And in fact, you may remember in the suit, the New York Times jumped through crazy hoops to make ChatGPT spit out actual paragraphs from the New York Times. But it only did that by providing the preceding 3 or 4 paragraphs and saying what comes next. OpenAI is going to challenge the order. They're pushing for oral arguments, hoping that user testimony will sway the court to set it aside. Maybe, Kathy, you can get involved in this. This seems to be a real overreach, to be honest with you. First of all, I'm not a fan of the New York Times lawsuit in the first place. But for then the court to order this huge invasion of privacy.
Yeah, I understand what the court's thinking because normally you do have to put litigation holds and not delete any evidence that's going to be relevant to a case. So that's not completely out of the blue. That's the kind of thing that would happen.
If it's the company's
right.
email, the company's conversations.
Right.
But this is their users' conversation.
And who is it compromise? And first off, it's getting retained. And second off, the reason it's getting retained is because in theory, somebody else is going to see it. And, there might be an adequate protective order about who gets to actually look at it. But the whole point is that somebody is going to be pawing through this data. In fact, it's going to be multiple somebody's pawing through this data because at minimum, you're going to have an expert on the New York Times site and somebody on OpenAI site so they can do some analysis on it. So the whole point of keeping it is so somebody can look at it, but that's where the problem is.
And don't the New York Times lawyers fight to make sure that their reporters don't have to reveal their sources? I mean, isn't this almost in a similar kind of vein?
Isn't that ironic? Because there would be reporters' sources in there potentially.
Yeah, among other things, yeah.
A lot of reporters use Whisper and other OpenAI technologies to transcribe conversations with sources. I mean, a good reporter probably shouldn't. They should be doing something locally, but nevertheless, I think it happens.
So what would actually be in these logs? Would it be the prompts and then the responses?
Yeah. And presumably any documents provided in the prompt, right?
Yeah,
so if I say, here's a transcript of my interview with a top secret source in the federal government, can you transcribe it and summarize it? I presume I don't know, but I presume the conversation would be saved as well as the results. Mm-hmm. That's part of the prompt. That's the RAG.
Yeah, and especially because I think some of the litigation is really not just talking about what went into it, but what was it spitting out, because it's going to look and see were there replications of copyrightable material. But this just seems really exhaustive. It's not at the moment, it's not even a finite universe of. So actually, one of the things to bear in mind in a lot of these discovery disputes is that it's broadly construed, but you really only have to produce relevant information. And I think there's a pretty strong argument that a lot of what they're getting.
Expedition in a way?
Well, phishing, but also that it's overbroad. And then, some of the defenses against producing things are it's not relevant. It's unduly burdensome because this is also going to keep a massive, massive, massive amount of data. Like physically, can it actually be archived? They may, OpenAI may want stuff to get deleted so they can get space back. So there are some defenses to it because even in our litigation system, which has very, very, very broad rules about what is producible. There are some limits, and this one seems to probably cross some of those limits. But conceptually, also for what Larry was saying, it's not exactly the same thing because these are different little vectors of law that are causing something to either be withheld or shared. But one of the problems we have is like law is kind of splintered, where you get like a vector of law saying thou shalt store or thou shalt save or delete or something. And we don't really have a coherent system that deals with all these different avenues. Yeah. And sometimes when reporters are getting told to produce something, somebody will dig up a vector that came from like another area of law and said, well, given these general rules about what is shareable, you should be subject to it. So it's not exactly shooting themselves in the foot, but it's the ethos is poor. And they could actually be making some law that will show up and hurt them later
And this
on.
comes up in the whole child pornography issue because prosecutors want evidence preserved, but companies often have privacy policies where they automatically delete data after a certain time. And so you have these two different legal principles, both of which have some, merit, essentially clashing with each other.
Well, I don't want to belabor this any longer, but maybe people should use a different AI, which of course is exactly what ChatGPT is afraid of, and probably the New York Times is thrilled to hear about.
If the Times, won this lawsuit, then they would be probably going after the other AI companies as well. So, using any AI that's running in the cloud would at some point, leave you susceptible to the same problem, the same privacy issue.
Plus, a lot of companies are actually using the OpenAI models. I don't know if that would be impacted or not. If someone else is using, OpenAI's LLM, would that also be subject to this court order?
Yeah, I mean, if you're using Siri and it, if you're using Siri and it sends a query to,
that becomes part of it.
Or Bing, or
that's why Apple warns you. By the way, when you do that, you're sending data to OpenAI. Your privacy is now moot. All right, we got to take a break. There's more AI news. We got a great panel. Larry Magid is here, Kathy Gellis, Sam Abul-Samad. There's some car stories for you, Sam. We got some car stuff. I want to talk about that Slate truck, too. I mean, that's old fun news a little bit, but I'm very curious what you think about it. But first, a word from our sponsor, and a good sponsor it is when you want to protect yourself. Bitwarden, the password manager I use and recommend, Steve Gibson uses and recommend. It's the trusted leader in passwords, secrets, and passkey management. Yeah, it's great for passkeys. With more than 10 million users across 180 countries, over 50,000 businesses worldwide, Bitwarden continues to protect individuals and businesses everywhere. G2 consistently ranks at number 1 in user satisfaction. Every year they do a World Password Day survey, in fact, you can read the whole survey results on the Bitwarden website. But one of the things I thought was interesting, you often think of the Gen Z, the internet generation, the generation that was born during the time of the internet and grew up with the internet. You'd think they would be the most internet savvy, right? They may be digitally native, but they are actually, according to this survey, guilty of the highest incidence of one of the most dangerous things you can do with passwords, reusing the same password on multiple sites. Survey says that 72% of Gen Z reuses the same password across accounts. Almost 3/4. Even though they know you shouldn't. 79% of them say, yeah, we know it's risky. Here's the other thing, the worst thing. So when you know how you get that email from a company that says we've been breached, we're going to reset your password because we don't know, some bad guy's got all the passwords. First of all, that's why you don't want to reuse a password, because if you use that password on that site and many other sites, bad guys are going to now try that password and log in everywhere, right? And make it into something you don't want them to get into. So when you get that email, you should change your password, right? 59% of Gen Zers just reuse the existing password when they're updating their accounts. So everybody needs it. And if you're a business and you've got employees who are Gen Z, and I bet you do, you need to know about Bitwarden and their new Access Intelligence. It's a new capability that helps businesses help employees proactively defend against internal credential risks and external phishing threats. Two core functionality here. Risk Insights reduces alert fatigue and allows IT teams to identify, prioritize, and remediate at-risk credentials, things like passwords that are showing up in breached sites and so forth. They also have an advanced phishing blocker, which will alert and redirect users from known phishing sites in real time. When they go to a site and try to enter their password, it goes, whoa! Using a continuously updated open source block list of malicious domains. The thing about Bitwarden you should know, and you'll want, because, well, we can see your employees may not be the most sophisticated. Bitwarden is easy. It's simple. They prioritize simplicity. For you, it's easy to set up. It only takes a few minutes. It'll import from most password management solutions, so you're ready to go quickly. Of course, one of the things I love about Bitwarden, in fact, it was the very first thing that brought me to Bitwarden, it's open source, GPL license. So anyone can expect the code on GitHub. It's regularly audited by third-party experts, and it meets stringent security and compliance requirements, SOC 2, Type 2, GDPR, HIPAA, CCPA, ISO 27001, 2002. You and your businesses deserve an effective solution for enhanced online security. So get started today with Bitwarden's free trial of a Teams or Enterprise plan. And I know all of you listening are good with your password hygiene. You don't reuse passwords. You already use Bitwarden or another password manager. But if you don't, or more likely, if you know somebody don't we all have friends and family who have the worst password hygiene? Tell them about Bitwarden. It's free forever across all devices when you're an individual user. It's open source across all platforms, unlimited passwords, passkeys too. Bitwarden.com/twit. I love Bitwarden. You will too. Bitwarden.com/twit. Back to the news of the week. That great big ugly bill that the Senate and the House are trying to pass does have a provision in it that would force states to not regulate AI in any way for 10 years.
Right.
Now, I'm not a big fan of AI regulation, but that does seem like a bit of first of all, it's a long time. And it does seem like the state should get to do that. It is not likely that provision will be removed in reconciliation. That's not what the sticking point is for this bill. So, Ro Khanna, from whose district includes Silicon Valley, he's in the House, says what this moratorium does is prevent every state in the country from having basic regulations to protect workers and protect consumers. It could restrict state laws that attempt to regulate social media companies, prevent algorithmic rent discrimination. That's probably part of the problem is this AI is very broadly defined in this, and anything algorithmic could be considered AI. Mm-hmm. Limit AI deepfakes they can't pass laws against AI deepfakes. It would basically, he says, give a free rein to corporations to develop AI in any way they wanted to develop automatic decision-making without protecting consumers, workers, and kids.
I have mixed feelings about this. I am generally a fan of federal law preemption when it comes to particularly communicative technologies, but maybe even technology in general. Like, this is a big issue that comes up with internet regulation. It is a problem when each state comes up with its own rules. This is why Section 230 is so useful, because it preempts the ability of individual states to try to regulate the internet. Because if we look at, like, are we going to get the same regulation out of California that we're going to get out of Texas? No. And what does a company do when the two sets of regulation don't match and don't meet? You can also see things where
the patchwork problem,
the patchwork
of laws.
Well, that's also there's no way you can make them all happy, particularly for the cross-border communications thing. But then we also see in terms of privacy law that every state wants to do it their way. Then it's patchwork, and then you've still got an enormous compliance problem, because even if the rules aren't inconsistent, there's too many rules.
If the feds say, well, we're going to pass a law regulating AI that preempts state law, but this creates a vacuum.
It's not only preempts, it's enforcing. I'm absolutely
there's no
with you,
federal
Kathy.
AI regulation either.
Kathy, I agree with you. And I in my article, which you'll find on the right column in the front page of Connect Safely, I make the same point that generally speaking, I don't like state laws because of the patchwork and conflicting each other, and it's impossible. It's hard enough in a global environment, but an American environment. But in this case, my theory is, and not even a theory, I mean, if you look at what's going on with the Trump administration and their tech bros, this is an attempt for them to essentially eliminate the regulation of AI. And if the federal
this may be
government
the last thing Elon did before he burned his bridges.
Right. And this is an administration that is fundamentally opposed at every level to any kind of regulation.
Right.
If they could, they would get rid of every federal regulation, which while I agree with you, Kathy, that a federal regulation that does preempt the state regulations would be better.
Yeah.
Well, could be better. Wouldn't necessarily be better.
Well, look at Maria Cantwell's privacy law,
yeah.
which as part of it did in fact preempt all state privacy laws, but it didn't replace them with a better law. It effectively defanged them with that same argument. Well, you can't have a patchwork quilt of laws without providing a better alternative.
Right.
Well, better also tends to be relative. I do think that is important, actually, that we still do get a federal privacy bill. And I think one of the critical things that we get out of it is preemption, because I think we've got some real problems with
yes.
I think I might take it even if it wasn't necessarily a good law, because I think there are some externalities we're kind of glossing over with what happens when every state does it its own way and it gets really inconsistent. And we have some big, not insignificant impingements on speech that can happen. And there's other collateral problems, but also just a huge compliance problem where you stifle innovation as well, because you have to have more lawyers on your staff instead of more engineers, among other problems. But in terms of this, I think one of the things that's emerging from this conversation is the sense of it's one thing to preempt prospectively when there's nothing, and it's another thing to preempt when you have something, the Congress actually is speaking in that area. And this is just kind of creating a vacuum. It's probably both under-inclusive and over-inclusive. The definitions are iffy. And I get the sense that this may have been proposed and promulgated by people I like who should have known better, because it kind of seems a little bit more like making a statement about a lot of the dumbness that comes up with how
Larry,
technology gets regulated.
You give a good example in your article about California's AB 3030, the Healthcare Services Artificial Intelligence Act, which requires healthcare providers to disclaim it when they're using AI. For instance, I just was in the doctor. He's got a little sign in his office saying, I'm using AI to record this conversation and analyze it. The conversation will delete it immediately afterwards. I use this for notes so I can pay attention to you instead of typing the whole time, which you used to do.
Yeah.
That would be a good law. And the fact that it's only in California, I mean, how often does California make a law that, because it's a good law, ends up changing the way AI works or some business works nationally?
And it was overwhelmingly supported by both parties. And by the way, Marsha Blackburn, the Republican senator from Tennessee, is concerned that this bill would, or this clause would preempt the Elvis law. That stands for...
Which it should.
Which it should, yes.
Well, I don't know. I mean, but the point is that there is bipartisan...
The Elvis law, which is a law in Tennessee, the Ensuring Likeness, Voice, and Image Security Act.
Right.
Protects Elvis, I guess, against AI impersonation.
So
is that the point?
I think the reason that this law got that this particular language managed to get promulgated and provided to somebody who was able to get it into the bills is because there's so much stupid. There's stupid in the states, there's stupid in the federal government. And the idea is, I think, to just kind of like press pause a little bit so that, do policy making in this space, but do it sensibly from a federally preemptive perspective.
You're in favor of light touch regulation, though, on the internet and now on emerging technologies, because we don't know yet, right?
Well, and so the bill that you're talking about from California, okay, that provision kind of sounds pretty benign and probably sufficient for, even states to be able to do, because you're really sort of regulating something so local. So there are some good things that can come out of the states, but we also know that the states, including California, looking at you, have a habit of taking gigantic hammers to things and producing really dumb things. Yeah. So in which case you really want the federal preemption because you want the states to stop doing dumb things. So I think this was a little bit of a stunt, and mostly to kind of just press pause on things so you could get more space.
It's a stunt that's going to be a federal law, though.
And I think the problem is, it's a stunt that is probably going to escape, control and end up becoming law, and we'll have to live with the consequences. But maybe the consequences, let's look at the silver lining. If the states can't act, maybe it does prompt the Fed to do something. Now, the downside is they could do something that's terrible, and now they've got more political pressure to do something, anything, and are more likely to do something that's terrible. But on the other hand, we won't have 51 versions of terrible because we'll just now have the one version of terrible.
Well, I'll give you an example of terrible. Federal judge blocks Florida from enforcing social media ban for kids. Florida outright banned the use of social media for children under 14.
Right.
And you even if the parent says yes, you can't. And if you have a 14 or 15-year-old, well, the parents can give permission.
Yeah.
That is unconstitutional, clearly. Yes.
Well, we hope clearly, and it's good that this court saw it, but occasionally we hit courts like looking at you, Fifth Circuit, that tend to struggle on these things.
Right.
So there's other cases that are Free Speech Coalition versus Media Matters came out of the Fifth Circuit, where they did not recognize the unconstitutionality of these things. And there's a new litigation that's just hit it about another one of the age gating legislation that came out of Texas.
We actually hired a policy consultant because of this. I mean, we're an internet safety organization, but we also believe in things like the First Amendment and the UN Convention of the Rights of the Child and other silly little documents that say you don't have to be 18 years old to enjoy the right of free speech. So there's a lot of these things that we wind up having to fight, even though they're done in the name of what we advocate, which is...
I'll die on this hill. Tell me what you think of it, Larry, that it really should be not the government's job, but the parent's job.
It should be the parent's job. And also we should recognize that there are young people, some of them are LGBTQ,
right.
Some of them have religious ideas or political ideas that differ from their parents, and they should be able to explore and express themselves, even if their parents disagree. Now, I'm not saying that there should be a free reign, that 4-year-olds should get to go to porn sites, but I am suggesting that preteens and teens deserve some privacy and some free speech.
I agree on that, but I don't think it's practical for the government to say, oh, parents, you can't block your kids from LGBTQ sites either. So I think that the reasonable compromise is parents should be given the tools they need to make these decisions for their kids. I think it's really clear that, in fact, Apple's already implemented this. Apple should have an API, a way for an app to query the device saying, is this kid old enough in the parent's eyes to use this?
Right. And there's a big controversy between Apple and Meta over that.
Well, there's a difference because Meta wants Apple to block stuff in the App Store. They want them to be the arbiter. I think the parent should be the arbiter. Right. Apple gives them a tool to you should have on Android and iOS a tool as a parent that says my kid emotionally is 8 or I don't care what chronological day, but emotionally they're an adult, and you should have that ability as a parent to set that. And then apps should have a way of querying it and would be required to adhere to it. Right. That would give parents control over it. Now, I agree with you, Larry. There are many cases where a parent shouldn't have control, but sorry, that's the way it is.
I'm more on the side of, legally a proposal like that may have fewer of the problems that a lot of the age gating does, because I think you're just saying that it's a check for whether the parent has given permission as opposed to whether it's recording anybody's true identity and verifying things like that.
Right. And maybe you don't have to give age verification of any kind as an adult or a child. Okay. And I also understand that a kid could go to his neighbor's house and use their phone. There's no perfect solution to this, but there are lots of imperfect solutions. I do think, like what Larry was starting to get at, that there is a risk vector itself if to the rights of kids too, if there's somebody their parent can completely overrule and essentially cut them off from the world, that there is a problem there. Although that's the way it is right now in every respect in a child's life.
Actually, not when it comes to reproductive health. California, I believe a minor can have an abortion without parental permission. I believe that's the case. I don't know if anybody can update me on that one.
But if
Yeah,
a
they're-
parent
they-
wants to have their kid get a certain kind of education, wants to keep them from leaving the house, wants them to dress like they belong in The Handmaid's Tale, a parent can do that. And there's no law against that. And there shouldn't be, I believe, because that was overreach by the government.
Although in Europe, there are, Europe, children have privacy protections vis-a-vis their own parents. In America, those laws don't exist.
Yeah.
So.
No, they do.
There-
Lisa, I remember Lisa, when she took her 13-year-old to the doctor said, "Okay, Mom, bye."
Yeah.
Yeah. Because
the
there
mom is
are
not, and she can't get her son's medical records. I remember I couldn't get my son's medical records when he was under 18. So there are protections like that. I suppose they're good. I hate to see government tell parents what to do. I admit there are bad parents, but I don't think that. I don't think government can fix that problem.
The problem is that with this policy problem, what you're basically saying. Actually, let me make 2 points. One is you're basically saying that if the government can pass a law saying we should have this apparatus, you've already gotten the government involved, and the government is placing its finger on the scale of how this is all going to get worked out. If Apple itself wants to offer this as a feature because it thinks it's a marketable feature and parents are going to want to buy, if you're going to buy your kid a phone, buy one where you can, have this ability to cut them off from your kids off from certain things. And fine, if it's a truly private choice between the consumer and the company, whatever. There may be some social externalities to study, but I'm not as bothered by it from a legal standpoint. But if you have the state saying there needs to be a law to require Apple to do it, then I think we've really sort of
Right.
The state is starting to navigate these really fraught issues in ways that are going to cause harm, even if they might cause some victories.
In this case, we have societal norms. We have moral authority. We don't need a law.
Well, right.
Apple, do the right thing, right?
Meta
That's
is
all we
actually
have to do.
pressuring.
But
states to do that.
how far is the right thing for Apple? Like, should it be just that, this emotional age type of threshold, or should they also give parents a list of here's topics that you can block?
Sure.
How far should they go with
emotional age, which everybody who's an expert in this field agrees that 13, 18, all of these numbers
It's arbitrary.
and
They're arbitrary.
meaningless.
Yeah.
But it's pretty hard to regulate around emotional age. So there will be an age.
The reason you have to do that
Right, but
is
I'm talking about
any
apart from
other
regulation.
System, any other system's going to require some sort of age verification. That's right out. You can't do it. There's no way to do that safely or privately. That's just a bad idea. So it has to be the parent is the judge. It doesn't even have to say emotional age. What's your child's birth date? But the parent can set it.
No, with that's then you're starting to get into age verification if you're starting to specifically look for that.
No, because it doesn't distribute the birth date. All it is an API that says, is this child allowed to use this? You don't know what the birth date is.
And there's
Well,
no
if it's-
no
the parent-
no
the
necessary
The only person
verification.
responsible for that is the parent. There is no verification. The only person responsible for that is the parent.
I think the argument that Meta makes, and it's a pretty good one actually, is that when you buy a child a phone, you're handing them a phone. You're the parent. You can set their age. When they go off today and sign up for an Instagram account, they tell Instagram how old they want Instagram to think they are.
Right.
And there's really no checks on that. Now, there's all sorts of technology that's being built and that's around that's called age assurance, but it doesn't.
I understand Meta does not want to do it.
Yeah.
They want Apple to do it in the App Store. What Meta should say is, Apple, you need an API that we can query that says, is it okay or not?
Right.
And that's all. And we just query it, is it okay or not? And the parent could say, never okay to install Instagram. Sam, you could have a setting that says never okay to install social media apps, whatever Apple wants to do in that light. The only thing Meta needs to know is it okay or not? It's a binary choice.
I have a concern about that, though, because if you have in the bad parent situation, if the parent on the phone context is able to veto that that Facebook can be installed, that's going to carry over to any other avenue that the kid is going to potentially need access to, because once the parent on the phone has said, oh, you don't get it, how are they going to be able to access their Facebook account anywhere else, including if they needed to?
This can't be solved on the App Store level. That's why you have Child Protective Services. That's why you have state and local means to protect children.
Yeah.
The App Store is not going to be doing
Well,
that.
it's also why it's basically what my whole career has been dedicated. You also
Right.
need to educate parents
Education,
and children.
I agree.
And ultimately,
But
as I said,
making these companies responble for it is not the path.
Right.
as I said
This
30
is-
years ago, the best filter is the one that runs between the ears. That
Yeah.
you've got to train your children to be
completely
critical.
agree.
And
Yeah,
you know,
this is a sociological problem, not a legal or a technical
Exactly.
problem. Although I would point out the second point I was going to make is we are essentially hitting the heart of Section 230 and what caused it to be passed in the first place, which was one of the features of Section 230 was to make sure that filtering technologies could be developed and used, where it was trying to create this space where those could exist. And you know, we like innovation here. There's cool things that technology can do. I'm not necessarily averse to like seeing if there's some technology that can be helpful in some context, but I think it is a mistake. And I think we're agreeing on this, that this idea that technology can definitively solve it, especially if it does things in a certain way, I think that's pie in the sky and potentially damaging to some very legitimate interests.
yeah.
All right, we're going to take a break. We'll come back with more. Got lots of conversation to do. Larry Magid, the CEO and founder of ConnectSafely.org. It's all about keeping kids safe online. Lots of good information there. ConnectSafely.org is the website.
And if you Google Family Guide to Parental Controls, you're going to get a lot of information on this, including some advice on what parents can do.
Do you think adequate? It's at the parental controls Apple and Google offer today are adequate?
They're moving actually closer to the Meta model. I think they're good. Adequate is the problem with adequate. It depends on the child. I think it's adequate for most kids,
Right.
but there's always exceptions. There's always
Well,
education.
but that's all you can hope for. Look, this is a big world. You can't be perfect. I don't think. Kathy Gellis also here, as you can see, a legal expert. And it's always good to have a legal expert when you're talking court cases here. Nice to have you, Kathy. And
Nice to be here.
we'll get some car stuff for you. Samable Samet, Wheel Bearings Podcast and VP Research at Telemetry. Stay tuned. Lots more to come. The show brought to you today by Shopify. It's difficult when you're starting a new business. You know, I know us by heart, learning all the new hats you have to wear. It seems like your to-do list is growing every day with new tasks that can easily begin to overrun everything else your entire life, right? Finding a tool that not only helps you out but simplifies everything can change everything for millions of businesses. That tool? Shopify. I love Shopify. And you know, so do my kids. Both my kids have online businesses using ShopPay, Shopify's store. They're not alone. Shopify is the commerce platform behind millions of businesses around the world. 10% of all e-commerce in the U.S., from the big guys like Mattel and Gymshark to brands just getting started like Salt Hank, use Shopify. It's so cool that Henry could go from being, you know, a TikTok celebrity to creating an online store where he sells his salts and his pickles and apparel. And he has, you know, I mean, I know he's my son, but he's not exactly a web designer. He was able to make a great site with the help of Shopify. My daughter, same thing. In fact, I just helped her set up her website for her book that she just published and she's selling online. And she said, Dad, I need to connect my domain name to Shopify. And I said, easy to do. And she did it. Get started with your own design studio with hundreds of ready-to-use templates. Shopify helps you build a beautiful online store to match your brand style. Again, I know this directly. You can accelerate your content creation. Shopify is packed with helpful AI tools so they can write product descriptions, page headlines. They can even enhance the product photography. Get the word out like you have a whole marketing team behind you. You do. You have Shopify. Easily create email and social media campaigns wherever your customers are scrolling or strolling. And best yet, Shopify is your commerce expert with world-class expertise in everything from managing inventory to international shipping to processing returns and beyond. If you're ready to sell, you're ready for Shopify. Turn your big business idea into with Shopify on your side. Sign up for your $1 per month trial and start selling today at shopify.com/twit. Go to shopify.com/twit. Shopify.com/twit. I am seriously a Shopify fan. I think this is empowering technology. shopify.com/twit. Take a look at what they can do for you. Shopify. I love that sound. I don't know. Does Henry hear that every time he sells some salt? He must be going crazy right now. Ching, 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 ching. Hey, just some good news while we're on the subject of government. TikTok is back. It's 75 days at a time. The president has once again extended the pause on the TikTok ban. Remember, Congress passed this. The president, former president, signed it. President Trump immediately put it on pause. Talks supposedly for a sale underway. I haven't seen any movement there.
Yeah, he doesn't lawfully have the ability to put it on pause because the predicate things that needed to happen in order to put it on pause haven't actually happened. And I remember sitting in like the front row of the Supreme Court while oral argument was happening and listening to Justice Sotomayor talking about, I don't even want to think about what it means for the president to not be enforcing a valid law. And yet here we are, where the president is not enforcing a valid law.
Declared him immune.
Law, but
the Supreme Court already said he was immune from prosecution for any official acts.
She didn't.
She didn't. But the majority of the court did.
Yeah. Well,
we go by majority rule here in this country.
Well, this is one of those cases where I agree with the president's decision, but disagree with his right to make it.
Yes, I think that sums it up. Yeah.
It's kind of the opposite of free speech, where you disagree with what they say and agree. But he should have no right to
there is so much other unlawful stuff going on that this seems de minimis compared to all the other things the court could be thinking about.
Yes, there's vastly bigger fish to fry, but when you start chipping away at like not caring about like law actually doing its law thing, then it becomes really difficult to have law be available to do the things you really needed to do.
Historians may look back and say it all started with TikTok.
I think the clock will start earlier than that.
Garcia is going to be part of that as well.
Yeah.
Well, I don't know. When did they write the Insurrection Act? 1807?
Wasn't it like
no, it was earlier than that, I think. Yeah.
1998, I think.
It seems odd to me that ancient bill would still be invocable today. And where's the insurrection anyway? But anyway.
Well, that's the big issue. The Constitution was written a long time ago, but you're right. Where's the insurrection?
Oh, I was thinking not the Insurrection Act. I was thinking the AEA.
Aliens and Sedition Act, another fine anti-First Amendment bill. They passed. It's so funny. The founders passed the First Amendment. And then within years, they created the Aliens and Seditions Act, which is exactly the antithesis of the First Amendment.
One of the things that happened, if you look at that history, is John Adams, I think, was big on pushing these things. And, he didn't have, the Supreme Court wasn't quite booted up the way it has been booted up. So it wasn't challenged, but it was politically incredibly unpopular. And it did in his political career. To the point that like some of this just ended up falling off the books. So there is a cautionary tale of like, even if you can manage to squeeze these kinds of autocratic things through, the people don't actually like them. So
Supreme Court has allowed Doge to access Social Security data. This is a very tangled web here because you've got the Social Security data, the IRS data, the OPM, the Office of Personnel and Management data, all of which are supposed to be siloed because they contain lots of information, personal information about people. Then you have Doge coming in and saying, we want to combine it all. And now we learn that Palantir has just made a deal to apply its database searching techniques to these databases. Mm-hmm. The U.S. Supreme Court granted the Trump administration's request to access sensitive Social Security information. The protections that kept that information out of the hands of other agencies are gone.
So I was talking about this case the last time I was here because there had been the injunction saying that they had to stay out of the Social Security Administration. And I was pointing out one of the issues that was kind of percolating out of it, which is there's a Fourth Amendment problem, which is the government is collecting all this data that it doesn't have a warrant for. So it's really collecting it via consent, but the consent is sort of contingent on the Privacy Act keeping it in these separate
When I turned
silos.
65, I gave the government a lot of information, including IDs, because I had to use ID Me, which I wasn't thrilled about, to sign up and all this stuff for my Social Security. But I thought I was giving it to only the Social Security Administration, and that it was being siloed and carefully protected. Now some 20-something named Big Balls has access to it.
Yeah. And what happened is not so. Once again, the Supreme Court did a tiny thing that ended up huge, but they think it's tiny, and in one context it is, where there was an injunction, and what they have done is stayed the injunction. So they're treating it as kind of this minor thing. They haven't overturned it. They haven't looked at the substance of the underlying case. They haven't said anything. It's just that the injunction doesn't get to function while the litigation continues. But functionally, that means now there's no functioning injunction. So all the people who are just restrained are no longer restrained.
I think I saw that on the function injunction. I'm just a bill on Capitol Hill. I feel like that might have been one of the songs on Schoolhouse Rocks. I might be wrong.
I thought it was a 60s sub comedy about trains and what there something junction.
So here's the question. No one knows the answer to this. This is purely philosophical. But does Doge still exist now that Elon has left town?
Yeah, it's still there.
Is Big Balls still embedded in all of these agencies?
I believe so. Yeah.
A month or two ago, there was a whistleblower at the Veterans Administration who said that when Doge got access to all the database of the Veterans Administration, they turned off all logging, first thing they did, and then exfiltrated 10 gigabytes of data to some place we don't know. And then within minutes, Russian accounts were logging in using Doge credentials into the Veterans Administration.
Right.
This whistleblower was a sysadmin. It got a lot of attention. NPR covered it. I saw he was interviewed by Rachel Maddow on MSNBC. He was threatened. There was a note taped to his door with a picture of him walking his dog from a drone shot, saying, "You might want to shut up about this." And then, by the way, I can't remember, was it CISA? One of the federal agencies said, "Yeah, we're not going to investigate this." And I haven't heard a word about it since. Now, I don't know what happened. I would like to know what happened. And it is I think, a good reason to be concerned that these Doge guys, who some of them have very shady backgrounds, including relationships with Russian hackers, are in there and are being given access to our most private information we gave the government with the understanding that it would remain private.
And one of the things about these injunctions is that, like the one for the Social Security Administration, I believe, was basically, it didn't keep them out completely. It just sort of throttled them through. You only get onboarded into these systems if you go through all the trainings a normal person would have to go through. Like, if you're sensible, you're trained, and you're independently trustworthy, you still can come in. But they couldn't come in for necessarily things that were not particular to the way the office was normally run. But they weren't even completely shut out. It was a very reasonable, kind of judicially supervised arrangement of where they could still get access if they could sort of make the claim that they had some legitimate need for it.
Incidentally, Doge is protected. The people have argued that they should be considered an agency, and then therefore under the Federal Freedom of Information Act, we should be able to see a wide range of their records. The Trump administration says, no, Doge just plays an advisory role. They're exempt from FOIA.
Right.
This is
But then why do they have access to all of this information?
Right.
Yeah.
If they're nothing but advisors, they shouldn't even be in here.
Yeah. And some of the district court judges have called them on this to say you're only an agency when you want to be an agency, and then you're not an agency.
Right.
So the inconsistencies have been noted.
But just like Elon is only an employee of the government when he feels like it.
Yeah.
Even private companies
but this is the
have
Supreme
policies
Court,
like that.
Kathy. This is it, right? It's over. There's no court of last appeal.
It's over-ish. The problem with these things is they were all shadow docket issues, and the Justice
So there's no
Jackson,
opinions written. They're just a vote.
No opinion was written. There was a very, very little, a little bit of text that came out with like there was a rush to the shadow docket to petition for the stay, and the stay was granted with very little text. But Justice Jackson wrote a dissent and is basically calling on them and saying, we are doing tremendous things with tremendous effects with no merits, no briefing, way too early in the process while we're still learning and the record is being established. And she's just pointing out that that it's ridiculous for the Supreme Court to do so much of such magnitude in its effect so carelessly and via this, really shortcutted, abbreviated, non-process. So I don't know what happens in these, but I wonder if the district courts are going to start getting creative. I also think that in a lot of the litigation, the litigants are going to stop asking for injunctions and start to ask for expedited briefing on the merits, which is what we saw with the Institute for Peace, who lost the TRO, which I think was an abomination. But what the judge did is said, okay, we're basically going to do briefings on summary judgment within weeks. And now there has been a decision on the merits. And that kind of puts the whole thing in it. And with summary judgment on the merits, they got their building back because now she doesn't have to do a preliminary injunction. She can do a real injunction because they've been found to have acted unlawfully.
That's possible with buildings.
Well,
but
it was more than the
data
building.
is exfiltrated, it's not possible. It's
that's
done.
true too. Yeah.
And if they have, which they certainly have by now, copied the database, it's out. I don't care what the court says in 2 weeks or 2 years. It's done.
And odds are it was copied a long time ago, long before this,
they
this
copied it
ruling came out.
Right.
Yeah. What's extra garbage about it is it's not like preliminary injunctions are a thing that only rarely exists. They are a major point of litigation. We have them because you want to be able to preserve the status quo and make sure that harm doesn't happen. And the Supreme Court is basically completely upending literally centuries of law, because injunctive relief comes from the common law in England. So they're just completely upending all the rules that ended up governing that. And we no longer have them available as a tool.
Let's cheer everybody up. I remember Elon tweeting that IRS Direct File was dead. That day, I immediately went and tried to use it. It was before April 15th, and it wasn't dead. It was fine. I created that nice ID Me account and all that. Well, it's dead. This is something that Intuit, the creators of TurboTax, H&R Block, and other commercial tax filing software did not want the federal government to have a free filing system because that would be bad for business, wouldn't it? Well, they got their wish, and the IRS Direct File system was killed. However, thanks to Jason Keebler writing in 404, Direct File has now been open sourced. It was originally created by the U.S. Digital Services. And of course, Doge has replaced USDS. And that software, which was created by USDS. Oh, and 18F, that's the other company that Doge killed, other agency Doge killed. Apparently, 300,000 people used it last year as a limited pilot program. Very positive reviews. Because, Jason writes, it's free, and because it's an example of government working, Direct File and IRS's free file program more broadly have been the subject of years of lobbying efforts by financial technology giants like Intuit. To kill it, Doge sought to kill Direct File. Remember, again, Elon said it's dead. There is no language in the great big ugly bill that would kill Direct File. But the IRS, I think the ships are burning quick, save the treasure, have released
the
code.
droids in the escape pod.
Yeah, the droids are in the escape pod. The source code's on GitHub.
But what about updates? TurboTax has to be updated at least once a year. Actually,
every year, there's
far
a
more
laws
often.
change.
So who's going to maintain this?
This will be an interesting thing. The three people who worked on it at USDS, Chris Given, Jen Thomas, Marichi Vinton, have left the government to join the Economic Security Project's Future of Tax Filing Fellowship. They'll be joined by Gabriel Zucker, who also worked on Direct File as part of Code for America. So there is an effort to, in effect, create a nonprofit that will continue to support this outside of government.
That's good. But I think the government should do it. I mean,
Of course the government
collecting
should
our
do
money,
it.
make it easy to process it.
You obviously do not work for Intuit, Mr.
Apparently
Magan.
not.
Well, one of the things that kind of excites me about this is so much has been lost that we spent money on with paying the right personnel to build good applications. So what I'm hoping is that this sort of archives it a little bit. So we go through this period, and then when we have a normal government again, we don't have to start from scratch because we have something that hasn't been lost forever. Because I worry about that to replicate
Yes.
all this infrastructure that's been destroyed is massively expensive and not a savings at all.
Well,
thank
check
God for
out
the
the
Wayback
Economic
Machine.
Security Project. That is a group that is trying to keep this alive as an open source project. I think there's enough people who care enough about this that perhaps this will survive.
Yeah. Also,
I
one
really
other
hope
nice
so.
But
thing.
wouldn't it require some? I assume it requires some cooperation from the IRS, some approval, some certification.
They publish whenever these rules are changed. They have to be published, and that's all Intuit has. That's all H&R Block gets. They look at the rules and they incorporate into the software. I don't think you have to get the IRS to help you.
I mean, I suppose you may have to plug in terms of if you were going to file the return.
Yeah, you probably need some API
and
access.
then pay. You need some sort of API access. So that I think may be true. But
They've got Direct File. I mean, there's going to
but
be
that may
API
be all
access.
you need.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And
There's-
let Intuit compete by being better. I mean, that's
Yeah.
No. That's not the way
That's
capitalism works. Right?
Are you new around here? We don't
I
do
guess
that.
It turns out that this was always a part of the plan. Open sourcing the project was required by a law called the Share It Act. Again, one of the things that'll probably be thrown out as soon as Trump realizes it exists. But, there's some good stuff.
He can't just things that are statutorily mandated. I mean, he's been ignoring a whole lot
Wait
of
a minute.
statutes.
You mean
but he
like
can't-
banning TikTok?
Yeah, well, things that are statutorily mandated, we're having some issues with him obeying the law. But
Don't you know
but
it's an
a different-
emergency that the
but it's
EO
a
trumps
different
the,
thing entirely of getting rid of the law entirely. So the law remains on the books. You'd have to get a whole bunch of his Republican friends in Congress to get rid of it. So
He's got a whole bunch of Republican friends in
yeah,
Congress.
Not that many.
Yeah.
I mean, they only have a 3-seat majority in each house.
Yeah. Well, sometimes when it comes to tech, they get some Democrat people who don't know what they're doing and they opt for the bad things too. But there was one other Doge thing before we move on from it. There was another decision that I think is worth keeping an eye on, which is most of the lawsuits have been attacking Doge, either in terms of Musk and Doge and also the agency that is at issue with that particular case. But there were a couple that were suing Doge in general as saying you are not an entity that has any business running around doing any of the things that you're doing. And one of the big cases was brought by a bunch of states led by New Mexico. And that was an early case where the judge there kind of had a sense of this does not seem like something you should be able to do, but it was dicta at the time. There was no injunction. But now they've survived, the case has survived a motion to dismiss, where there's at least enough where now a judge has said, I have a finding that at least in terms of what we evaluate at this stage of the case, it looks like you have no business doing the things that you were doing. So that's an interesting benchmark that we've just gone through, and that case will proceed and we'll see where that goes. But that was, if you are not a fan of the Doging, this was a good ruling to be aware of.
You're just trying to cheer me up.
Yeah.
Well, I mean,
let's
this whole Doge thing has been such a sham from the beginning. Yeah. They've already acknowledged that they're not going to save very much money, if any, at all. And there was an NPR interview this
Pretty
week.
clear what the point of Doge was.
With a former staffer that was working in the VA, a Doge staffer, and he acknowledged that. They found that federal waste, fraud, and abuse at the agency that they were supposed to uncover was relatively non-existent, I quote, I personally was pretty surprised actually at how efficient the government was. And, this is true of a lot of agents like Medicare. The Medicare system is way more efficient than any of the private health insurance companies. They pay, and the U.S. Medicare system pays about 3%, spends about 3% on administrative costs, compared to about 17 to 18% for most private health insurers.
Mm-hmm. Well, the irony about the Doge savings is that on the day that Elon and Trump got into their little pissing match, Tesla lost almost as much market value as he claims to have saved in Doge.
Yeah.
He claimed to have saved about 180 billion. Tesla went down 140 billion that same day. So it's up a little bit, but and even that 180 billion is subject to a great deal of skepticism.
Yeah.
So.
I have an interesting story we're going to take a break and come back and talk about that may explain, this is from Quartz, why there have been so many layoffs in the tech sector over the last 2 years. Because you look at, for instance, the most recent example, Microsoft laying off 6,000 programmers the day after they announced record profits. And it really makes you wonder, what's going on? Why are these companies, is it just to appease the stock market? Or do they really have too many employees? What's going on? Why are so many people being put out on the streets? Well, it could have to do with the tax code. We will get to that in just a moment. Larry Magid is here. Kathy Gellis, Sam Abul-Samad. We're glad you're here too. We do Twit every Sunday afternoon. You can always watch us live if you're around 2 p.m. Pacific, 5 p.m. Eastern, 2100 UTC. We stream it on 8 different platforms, including our Discord for our club members, but also on YouTube, Twitch, X.com. Hi, X.com. How's Elon doing, huh? TikTok, Kick, Facebook. How's Mark doing? And LinkedIn on all the platforms. So watch live if you want. After the fact, though, on-demand versions of the show available on our website, twit.tv, and wherever you get your podcasts. We're glad you listen, whether it's live or after the fact. We appreciate you being here. Our show today brought to you by ZipRecruiter. Oh, man, summer's here. Seasonal businesses are hiring everything from mule packers to drama camp leaders. That means people with, pretty specific skills are in high demand and probably not that easy to find, whether you're hiring for one of those roles or any other role. How about you find the top talent before the competition gets to them? And how do we do it? ZipRecruiter. Right now, you could try ZipRecruiter for free at ZipRecruiter.com/twit. ZipRecruiter's powerful matching technology does a deep dive to identify top talent for your roles. Immediately after you post to your job, ZipRecruiter's smart technology starts showing you qualified people for it. Gear up for summer with ZipRecruiter's high-speed hiring tools. See why 4 out of 5 employers who post on ZipRecruiter get a quality candidate within the first day. Just go to this exclusive web address right now to try ZipRecruiter for free. ZipRecruiter.com/twit. Again, that's ZipRecruiter.com/TWIT. ZipRecruiter, the smartest way to hire. This is from Catherine Bob writing at Quartz. It sounds credible to me, but I am not sure, but I thought maybe I'd run it by you all, not just our panel, but our listeners. She writes, between 2022, 3 years ago, and today, a little noticed tweak to the U.S. tax code has quietly rewired the financial logic of how American companies invest in research and development. Outside of CFO and accounting circles, almost no one knew it existed. So this was buried deep in the 2017 tax law under Trump, right? The delayed change to a decades-old tax provision has contributed to the loss of hundreds of thousands of high-paying, white-collar jobs. Since the start of 2023, started last year, or a year and a half ago, more than 500,000 tech workers have been laid off, according to industry tallies. 500,000 people. What's known as Section 174 of the U.S. tax code has helped gut in-house software and product development teams everywhere, from Microsoft to Meta to much smaller direct-to-consumer other internet-first companies. There's a bipartisan effort to repeal the 174 change. It's moving through Congress right now. So it's a little complicated, but I think it's simple to understand. For the last 70 years, companies could deduct 100% of the qualified research and development spending in the same year they incurred the costs. So in the same year that they paid programmers, contractors, they could deduct that fully. 100% comes off the top of your income. The deduction was guaranteed by the tax code, Section 174 of the tax code of 1954. And since then, R&D has flourished in the U.S. It's been very good for tech companies. It was repealed. Congress passed the Tax and Cuts Job Act in 2017, slashing the corporate tax rate from 35% to 21%. In order to make it comply, this is the interesting thing. In order to make that comply with the Senate budget rules, they had to offset the costs. So they added future tax hikes that wouldn't kick in right away, so that businesses wouldn't go, hey, that could, in theory, be repealed later. So they made a change to 174, saying you had to amortize your R&D expenses over 5 or even 15 years. That's a big change from deducting it the year you spent it. But it wouldn't kick in until 2022. When did the firings kick in?
2022.
Yeah. Now, there are people who are trying to fix that change, but right now, it's the law. R&D is not an immediate write-off. The tax benefits of salaries for engineers, product managers, project managers, data scientists, even some UX and marketing staff, the cost has to be spread out over 5 or 15-year periods. That's a big deal. Any thoughts on this? I've never heard of this.
This is not unique to the tech industry either. Over the last couple of years, there have been thousands of engineers laid off from the auto industry as well. GM last summer laid off 1,000 software engineers. This in an era when they are supposed to be transitioning to software-defined vehicles. We've had similar layoffs and buyouts of engineers from most of the automakers over the last couple of years. So I wouldn't be surprised if the same logic is applying in other industries as well.
In the 2023 annual report, Meta describes salaries as its single biggest R&D expense. Between the first and second years that the 174 change began, Meta cut its total workforce by 25%, Microsoft 7%, Twilio 22%, Shopify cut almost 30% of its staff, Coinbase 36%. This makes sense. This was because you can't deduct them anymore. Now, we could argue about whether you should have been able to deduct it or not, but that seems to me a very credible.
Yeah. And if you're going to change it, you need to change it carefully to absorb whatever all the energy in the system.
Change. Yeah.
Yeah. A secret change, but a secret change that doesn't manage what the fallout is, because now it's really disadvantaged labor. So even if you were to say, on balance, maybe this would be a better long-term way to do it, you probably need to soften the landing in some way. And since nobody was aware of it, really, it didn't soften the landing at all. Right. And now you're losing hundreds of thousands of people from the labor economy, and that's going to catch up with us in a really bad way.
I'd love to hear from CFOs or somebody about what all this, if this is a sensible story. It kind of makes sense to me anyway. How about this? The AI startup. It was so we've been talking a lot about vibe coding. In fact, we did a whole episode in our club on Friday of we have an AI user group that meets every first Friday of the month on vibe coding. It was so much fun. We're going to do more of that. After that, I started vibe coding a Twit app. I was able to get Claude Code to understand our API, connect with it, start downloading information. It's kind of amazing without writing any code myself. There was a startup in India that claimed to be a kind of a vibe coding, Builder.ai. Turns out there was no AI in Builder.ai. They actually had hundreds of human workers in India pretending to be chatbots. The London-based company was valued at $1.5 billion. They were overstating their income by significant, as much as 300%. The company claimed $220 million in revenue. They just made 50, and it wasn't an AI company at all. It was just 200 programmers in India.
It's probably the vibe coding equivalent of let me Google that for you.
Yeah,
instead of Googling, they're going and
they might have done all right if they'd said, "Hey, look, we've got 200 great programmers in India. You can use." I don't know. There are people who probably would have preferred that to an AI. I'm a little worried as a podcaster. Google's NotebookLM now has gone public. It lets you. So this was actually. I know we played with it on the shows and talked about it. You could upload documents and then it would analyze those documents. You could ask a question of it, but even more popular in the public eye, you could create a podcast with two AI voices talking back and forth about the content. Well, now you can actually share those publicly, and I think we're in deep trouble.
Uh-oh. Have you loaded in your bio, Leo?
What do you mean?
I loaded in my bio. The bio that I am so impressed with myself. I had no idea I was as spectacular.
This Larry Magid guy is amazing. It is a little sycophantic. Yeah.
It's like, and then just to make sure that I wasn't going too much too egotist, I found on the web a bio of some random plumber somewhere. A good plumber, no question about it. Put his bio into that, and he was amazing too. So, everybody's amazing.
I'll give you a little example. I uploaded to NotebookLM. I uploaded, it was only like 10 shows, the transcripts from Security Now. Mm-hmm. And then it takes a little while to load the conversation. Let's see if I can load it in. And then I made a little podcast out of it. And it kind of, I could see listening to this. Here, listen. See if you would listen to this show.
Welcome to the Deep Dive. We're here to unpack the latest in security and tech, pulling out the key insights for you, the learner.
Yep, lots to cover today. We've got sources touch on everything from browser security pitfalls to how your car might be spying on you.
And encryption battles, hardware security failures. It's quite a mix. Our goal is to make sense of it all without getting bogged down in jargon.
So those are AI voices, AI podcasters doing content directly from the Security Now transcripts. It's only a matter of time. There was an article in Vanity Fair about the CEO of Microsoft, Satya Nadella. He said, I love podcasts. And then he asked him, well, which ones do you listen to? So, I don't know. I load them all into Copilot, have it analyze it, and then I play the analysis back in my car and have interactions with it. So he doesn't listen to podcasts.
The problem is, there's this term garbage in, garbage out. But what I discovered today is you can actually put in, really fine cuisine and get garbage out. You can upload documents. I was telling you this off the air. I uploaded, I was concerned about my hearing. So I took, and I have some minor hearing deficits. So I loaded in a bunch of audiograms into ChatGPT, one of which was created by Apple AirPods today. And it told me I had severe hearing loss at a certain frequency. And I said, wow, that's kind of scary. So then I went and looked at the audiogram, and it just got it wrong. There was not.
It just misinterpreted it.
It misinterpreted the data that I gave it.
Yeah.
And I know it hallucinates, but I figure if I'm going to feed it a document, it ought to get that right.
You think so?
Yeah.
Jeffrey Fowler at the Washington Post, I guess he's done this before. He took all the main LLMs and he did a couple of things. He fed it a novel and asked it to summarize the main points. And then as a judge, he brought in the author of the novel. Who said, okay, I'm doing this under protest. He got permission from the publishers to do this. And he said, some of them were good, some of them weren't good. He said they really got the epilogue down right. They got all the emotion out of it. But one thing, and then Fowler did it with the legal documents. You'd probably be interested in that, Kathy. The only AI of all of them that did not hallucinate at all was Anthropic's Claude. Everything else hallucinated. Would make up characters. in one case in this novel, it's a Civil War novel. A soldier just got his leg amputated, showed up on somebody's doorstep, completely made up, completely fantasy. So, but maybe, I don't know, try it with Claude and see, because
I don't understand it, because I understand how if I ask it a question, it's going to go off on the web and get all sorts of extraneous
Then
data.
you're going to get weird
but if
stuff.
I feed it data,
you shouldn't make that
seems
mistake.
to me it should just reinterpret that data. I don't know.
Well, there was, I forget if we talked on it about the last time I was here, but there was an incident where a lawyer got in trouble for a hallucinated citation, but it wasn't in this case really the lawyer's fault, because they didn't do legal research where the AI made up cases that didn't exist. The lawyer already knew the material that they needed to be cited, and they just fed it through. And I think it might have been Claude, but I'm not positive, that they fed it through the AI for citation formatting, which should be like low-hanging fruit for, you know, you do it with a script. So like, why should a bot be any worse? And it didn't do it in any sort of true way. It invented and hallucinated a news source. And so the lawyer filed the thing and got in trouble for it, because when the sites were checked, it produced a bad result. It was a hallucinated thing. But because the AI substituted the hallucinated thing it made up and deleted the actual source that the lawyer was trying to get into the filing. So if you can't trust the AI to do basic tasks without, you know, just wandering and frolicking and detouring, as lawyers say, and coming up with all sorts of garbage, you know, the lawyer should have supervised it. There should have been a site check and stuff to find the problem before it went through the courthouse door. But that should not have been a thing that went wrong. The AI was supposed to make the lawyer's job easier, and it made the lawyer's job now terrible.
You saw that Robert Kennedy Health and Human Services report, which was
yes, it was a formatting error.
Formatting error. Well, maybe that's what they did. I don't know.
I think one thing we should probably stop doing is using the word hallucination.
I agree, because that's anthropomorphizing it. I agree.
And I read a good paper a couple of months ago called ChatGPT is bullshit. Where
yes, good paper.
Yeah, you know, the context there is they're analyzing LLMs in the context of Harry Frankfurt's on bullshit. You know, where the definition of bullshit is not, you know, that it's trying to mislead you. It's just that it's a complete disregard for the truth. It doesn't care. And that's what fundamentally the way LLMs work. They just don't care. So they
actually don't even care is not even a word you should use.
Yeah.
They're not intended to be factual.
Right.
Period.
It's just a probability engine of what should the next word in this sequence be.
There's no intent
based on
there's no thinking.
Right. And that's why it fits with that Frankfurt definition of bullshit.
Yeah.
I have mixed feelings about this. I tend to like using hallucination to describe what it is that we end up describing about it, because I think it's a term that is very specific in terms of the effect of what it's doing. But I otherwise agree with the larger point, which is that, you know, these are soulless things. Mm-hmm. This is like a sociopathic technology. And I worry about in contexts where people do have relationships with their bots, that this is worse than dealing with a con artist, where somebody who's just feeding you a line to kind of manipulate you. And you're sort of like, we're human beings. We tend to presume there's a soul and a conscience on the other side, and there's not. And this is where people really get hurt, when a soulless sociopath, you know, tells them what they want to hear and doesn't care how they're misleading them. And this is, in that sense, I think your caution is correct, because I think we really need to break those human these parasocial relationships that are coming up between people and their AI. So I agree very much there, but I do kind of like hallucination in terms of really describing what the effect is of what's getting produced by it.
As a child of the 60s, I consider that cultural appropriation, because hallucinations aren't necessarily bad in the real world. I mean,
as also a child of the 60s, if you can remember it, you weren't there. No,
well, maybe. I was there.
I was there. I remember it too.
Or I was there to the extent that anybody was there.
Yeah, we weren't completely there.
Floating over it occasionally.
Yeah, mostly there.
You experienced it firsthand.
I agree with you, Kathy. Actually, it's a good point. Because I don't, in general, I try to discourage anthropomorphizing AIs, because it kind of leads to a misunderstanding of what's going on. But you're right. From the point of view of the user, it is kind of like that. It is a hallucination.
Yeah,
But no
it
intent
focuses on the
part of
harm.
AI.
Yeah.
But the problem with it always sounds very reasonable because it is,
That's
the
its
way the engines
job.
work. And so it's very believable. And as I've always said, if it's an important decision, you need to vet it. But on the other hand, it's a great way to start a research project.
I use it all the time.
I use it
Perplexity
constantly.
just added a deep research thing, which takes 10 minutes. Before I went to the doctor, I gave it all my medical information and had questions, and it really gave me a great research paper that I was able to go into the doctor kind of prepared. And I think look, I use...
And now the New York Times know your entire medical history.
Yeah, I know. I use AI all the time for everything. You just have to be judicious in it. That's all.
I think to Sam's point, maybe I don't know, what would we say instead? Because this is the technological equivalent of pulled out of its technological ass. But that's too many words. And you still have sort of a personification thing. It's like something random has been invented.
Yeah.
It's incorrect, but it's incorrect in a way that I think we have to convey why it is incorrect. It's invented.
Invented is a good word.
To me, it's a little bit like full self-driving. And the reason I say that is that when full self-driving first came out, it was a joke. And I just paid no attention to it.
You have a Tesla. You drive
now
a Tesla.
It's very good. Yeah. It's far from perfect. It's only going to get you killed one out of a few hundred times.
But you do keep your hands on the wheel.
Or at least your eyes on the road. But my point is that ChatGPT is the same thing. It's gotten so good that most of the time you can rely on it, but you can't rely on it. And that's the part. And that's in some ways the most dangerous.
Right. Yeah, you're getting into that uncanny valley where if you get to the point where you're relying on it, you are very likely going to miss the times when you shouldn't be relying
exactly.
on it.
Right.
And that's the problem with full self-driving. If you're not paying attention, it can kill you.
It's
if
the problem with GPS.
It's a great driver assistant.
I don't know how to drive anymore because if the GPS doesn't tell me to turn left, I'm just going to... And so we've all become more or less dependent on these automated tools. And that is something to be aware of.
In other words, instead of robots taking over the world, they're turning us into robots, is what you're saying.
I saw Wall-E.
They're turning us stupid.
We're going to be driving around, slurping our Slurpees in our little hover cars, watching Days of Our Lives.
You used to have a Tesla, and of course, the FSD wasn't as good as it is now. Yeah. But half the time I'm kind of watching to make sure I'm not going to crash into anything. But I actually have no idea where I'm going.
I have a BMW i5. They have a similar ADAS system that I think is very good. It's highways only, right, Sam? I do like that. Like Blue Cruise and these other technologies, they don't try to do it on city streets. That's really challenging for FSD. But it does just fine on the highway. It has a feature that's a little creepy. It will pop up a thing saying, you could be going faster. If you check your side mirrors, I will change lanes for you. And
Tesla doesn't even ask you to. It just does it.
It just does it.
I don't even like... I drove a car with...
do it now.
Yeah.
I drove a car with lane policing, and it made me really uncomfortable.
Oh, I like that. I live with that now. You're right, because we, I think as humans, we tend to drive perhaps a little closer to one of the lines than the other. Yeah. It's going right down the middle. And that often, especially if there's a truck on the left, I want to go a little bit to the right. I don't want to go
actually,
right.
that's
I
what
had
a lot
my
of
reasons
the systems
for being over here. There were important reasons. Stop yelling at me.
Actually, a lot of these systems now do that, like Blue Cruise, Super Cruise.
Nice.
When it detects that it's a truck, you're passing a large truck.
It'll go over.
It will nudge you over. It'll stay within the lane, but it'll nudge you over towards the opposite side of the lane.
Yeah.
That is helpful.
I didn't even like being yelled at, but I definitely don't want to lose control of the car where I'm fighting with the car over it.
Oh,
I don't want something braking for me. No. I don't want something steering for me.
Yeah. So the Tesla systems sometimes do fight back against against driver intervention.
Not my BMW. I can grab the wheel and
other
take
systems.
it out.
Yeah. So the other systems generally, if you give it any force at all on the steering wheel, if you hit the brake,
Tesla, I've never had Tesla prevent me from taking control. Either by hitting the brake, putting pressure on the steering wheel.
The problem is it's the system is very inconsistent. Most of the time it doesn't. But sometimes, every once in a while, as you said, every once in a while, it will do something very, very wrong.
Oh yeah.
And it's not again, partly because it's so overwhelmingly controlled by AI, is that it doesn't behave the same. If it was a deterministic system, then it would tend to behave the same way under the same circumstances all the time. But it doesn't. Right. And you can be in the same circumstances. There's been a lot of testing independent testing that's been done that shows going down the same road on the same time of day, same conditions, it will do totally different things. Mm-hmm. Which is not what you want in a system.
But so do human beings.
Right. But
yeah.
But yes, human beings do it. But if you're going to replace the human with the technology should be better.
That's
in a related story,
otherwise, there's no point.
Yeah.
The courts in California have decided that it is illegal for you to hold your cell phone while driving, even if you're looking at the map.
And that's probably a good thing.
I think it's a good thing. I'd agree with it.
I mean, wasn't it already illegal to hold your phone at all?
The state law prohibits drivers from texting or talking on a cell phone while driving.
I thought you're not even allowed to hold the phone while you're driving.
Yeah, it's also. Let's see. The court. Yeah, I think the court upheld the law basically.
Okay.
Yeah, it's illegal to hold a phone. Yes, as I remember when they passed the law that everybody said, "Don't even touch the phone." Because the CHP will give you a ticket if you touch the phone.
You have to touch it sometimes through GPS, unless you get hands-free.
Yeah, that's a good question. Like if it's in a holder, you're not holding it. The legislator adopted the current state law prohibiting drivers from, quote, operating a cell phone while driving. Whatever operating means.
Operating? What if you're doing hands-free? That's okay.
Yeah, what is operating? And
there's probably some case law that establishes what operating means.
Exactly. Yeah. That's
because that's going to come up with. I would look in like DUI litigation. Somebody's probably sued for what does it mean to operate?
Well, this is what happened. A guy was ticketed after looking at a mapping application while holding his phone in his left hand and driving. He contested the ticket, lost his initial court appearance, ordered to pay a $158 fine, but he said, "I'm right." So he went to the appellate division of the Santa Clara County Superior Court. The decision was reversed. The Superior Court said operating a cell phone required active use or manipulation of the device. Merely observing GPS directions does not infract. But California Court of Appeal for the 6th Appellate District disagreed and on Tuesday reversed the decision. So you're right, Kathy. That's
because Android and iOS are both built in Santa Clara County. We want people to use our phones all the time.
I mean, I have GPS. Look, every car now has GPS screens.
Right. Which can also be distracting.
I'm looking at, definitely. I'm looking at it sometimes. This is another thing I like about that BMW. It has a heads-up display that will show me the instructions, so I don't have to look away from that. Yeah.
The new Cadillac Vistic has an augmented reality heads-up display, so it's a multi-plane display. So normally your HUD, if you look at your heads-up display, it's projecting the data to be flat. Roughly about 6 or 7 feet away from you, but roughly around where the front bumper is.
Right.
This new one projects information in multiple planes. So when you're using navigation, for example, as you're approaching a turn, it'll show a big arrow hovering over the intersection
where you're supposed to turn.
Yeah, and as you get closer, it appears to get closer to you as you approach it. It doesn't block your
view of the intersection, though?
No, it's translucent, so you can see through and around it. So it's
like
not
the new Apple UI they're going to announce tomorrow. Yeah. All right, I'm going to take a break. We will talk about that. We will talk about Volvo's IoT seatbelts. I don't know what that means, but Sam will explain it. And of course, the fastest selling game device in its first day ever. All of that still to come. You're watching This Week in Tech as we talk about the week's tech news. Our show today brought to you by ThreatLocker. Man, you don't have to listen to the security now to know the ransomware is killing businesses worldwide. They get in all sorts of ways: phishing emails, infected downloads, malicious websites, RDP exploits. Look, this is the last thing you want to have happen to your business. That's why you need ThreatLocker's Zero Trust platform. And Zero Trust is the key. It takes a proactive, listen to these 3 words, deny by default approach. Every action is blocked unless it's explicitly authorized. Protects you from known and unknown threats because it's like hitting a brick wall to them. It is exactly the kind of protection a city government, a school district needs, big businesses, infrastructure companies like JetBlue. JetBlue uses Threat Locker because they can't, they can't let their business get shut down. The Port of Vancouver, talk about infrastructure, they use Threat Locker to shield themselves from zero-day exploits and supply chain attacks, and very nice, providing complete audit trails for compliance. You know exactly what you've approved, what you haven't approved, who used what, when, where. Threat Locker's innovative ring fencing technology isolates those critical applications from weaponization. It stops ransomware cold. It also limits lateral movement within your network. See, that's part of the problem. Bad guys get into your network. On average, it takes 91 days for a company to realize they've been breached. So the bad guys at that time can wander around at will, go and look at anything, run applications. We had a story on Security Now about a ransomware team that got in to a company's network. The company had, some sort of protection software, so they couldn't do everything they wanted, but then they were able to move around. That's what you want to stop, that lateral movement. And they found a camera, a security camera, that was running, as many do, Linux, and had a little bit of memory and a little bit of a processor, but it was enough to inject their malware into it and to ransomware the entire operation using the camera. You need Threat Locker to stop that lateral movement within your network. Threat Locker works across all industries. It supports Mac environments as well as Windows, provides 24/7 good quality US-based support, and enables comprehensive visibility and control. I'll give you another example. City governments are bombarded by ransomware all the time. Mark Tolson is the IT director for the city of Champaign, Illinois. He said, enough is enough. He installed Threat Locker. This is what he says about Threat Locker, and I'm quoting. Threat Locker provides that extra key to block anomalies that nothing else can do. If bad actors got in and tried to execute something, I take comfort knowing Threat Locker will stop that. Stop worrying about cyber threats. Get unprecedented protection quickly, easily, and cost-effectively with Threat Locker. Visit threatlocker.com/twit. Get a free 30-day trial. Learn more about how Threat Locker can help mitigate unknown threats and ensure compliance. That's nice. threatlocker.com/twit. You will be amazed at how affordable it is. You can really protect yourself with Threat Locker. Thank you, Threat Locker, for supporting Twit. What are IoT seatbelts, Sam?
So IoT is probably a bit of a misnomer here. Basically, they're smarter seatbelts. So what Volvo is doing here with these new seatbelts that are coming next year on the new EX60 is they're taking advantage of the various sensors they have on the car, and trying to better judge the situation, both outside the vehicle and inside the vehicle. For some time now, most seatbelts in modern cars have already they've already had some smarts built into them, so that they adjust. Depending on the impact force and various other things.
That's almost mechanical, though, right? Like if it's leaned forward, or
originally it was. But now it's not.
Okay.
So seatbelts, modern seatbelts in cars for the last 20-ish years have all had pretensioners on them. So when there's an impact, the first ones actually used a pyrotechnic device to retract the seatbelt.
An explosive.
To pull you back tight.
Man.
So you didn't hit the steering wheel.
Right.
And that was a good thing. But
might have broken some bones, but at least you're alive.
It wasn't that powerful.
Okay.
Or at least it wasn't intended to be. Sometimes it could, but it was better than the alternative. But it was, kind of a one-shot thing, and there was no adjustment for different body sizes, where you were sitting relative to the steering wheel. So, depending on how tall you are, you might be, if you're shorter, you're going to be sitting closer to the steering wheel. It didn't have adjustments for that. So what they're doing now with these new systems is they're taking advantage of looking at, where's your seat positioned, looking at using the driver monitor system, because a lot of modern cars now have an infrared camera, like your BMW does, that is looking at you to make, to check that you're watching the road, and hands on the steering wheel, various other things, but also looking outside, looking at what is the direction of the impact. For example, it knows, okay, I'm going to have, what's called a small offset impact. If somebody crosses the center line and you have a glancing blow, that's a different impact than a direct head-on impact. And so it responds differently based on all of these different factors, and it adjusts the amount of pre-tensioning, based on your size, your body type, and the type of impact that's going on.
Wow, that's kind of cool.
Yeah,
this is a video from Volvo.
And Volvo invented the 3-point seatbelt back in the 1950s.
Oh, really?
Yeah, okay. They were the first ones to do it.
Shoulder plus lap belt.
Yeah.
Didn't it just involve a physical mechanism involving some pendulum type action that when the momentum
that was the early thing. Yeah, it was a pendulum type action. But now, and then they went to a pyrotechnic system, and now they're going to an electromechanical system that can adjust the amount of tensioning force on the seatbelt automatically based on all these other factors.
This is an example of how everything now, there's cameras, there's sensors, there's radar, there's so much information now.
Yeah.
And it makes sense for the auto to use it. I mean, it's expensive though. Doesn't it add greatly to the cost?
It does. I mean, we're putting these sensors on the car anyway. So what we're seeing here
it's just using the information.
We're finding new ways to use the sensors.
Yeah. Okay.
Okay. So we put these sensors on the car. What else can we do with them to enhance safety? And so they're using it in a bunch of different ways. Another example for Volvo is what they call their driver understanding system. So, Leo, you remember back in 2017, I think, when I first took you for a ride in the Cadillac CT6 with Super Cruise.
Yeah.
And it has that infrared camera on the steering column.
It was looking at my eyes. I had to cover my eyes to get it to warn me.
Yeah. And that was a fairly simple system that all it did was look at your eye gaze and head position,
right?
Just to make sure, are you watching the road?
Yeah.
And if you look away from the road for more than a few seconds, it would alert you, and it would start to, if you didn't respond, it would start to disengage Super Cruise. Well, what Volvo's doing,
it also shook the seat.
Yeah, it was a haptic seat too.
Tension the seatbelt. It was like it was shaking you to wake up.
Yeah. What Volvo is doing now is what they call driver understanding system. So they've done a lot of research, because one of the things that happens when you use these systems like Super Cruise or FSD, where you're supposed to be watching the road, if you're on a long road trip, what can often happen is your eyes might be on the road, but you're not actually attentive.
Your brain's not there.
And this is one of the problems is, you start to get that 1,000-yard stare. So your eyes are pointed towards the road, but you're not ready to take control if you need to. Mm-hmm. And so what Volvo, they've got some anthropologists that have been, and behavioral scientists that have been looking at this and trying to model human behavior to better understand not just on where your eyes are looking at any moment in time, but also looking for patterns of, are you occasionally glancing over at the mirrors, at the screen? Are there other signs that you are actually alert, rather than just completely zoned out? Your eyes may be open, but you're not. You're not. Really
how would
there.
it know? Your pupils are dilating, or you're drooling?
It's looking for a variety of factors. Like I said, it's looking for eye motion. As well as head
AI,
motion.
isn't it? This is AI.
Part of it is AI.
But
yes.
that can happen even without driver assistance. I remember, passing an exit on the highway, because I was just sort of spaced out listening
All
to
the
music,
time.
thinking about
Yeah.
other things.
All the time.
You know,
Yeah, and there's an increasing number of vehicles that, like a lot of Toyotas, a lot of Hyundai and Kia vehicles now. They have, even though they don't have a hands-free system like Super Cruise or Blue Cruise or FSD, they do have that driver monitor camera that's just looking for distraction.
Yeah.
Just trying to make sure that you are paying attention to the road, and if you're not, then it'll start to provide some alerts and try to get your attention.
My 2016 Prius yells at me if it thinks that I'm not paying attention, but it gets it wrong. Like if I'm on a certain road in Yosemite that's highly curvy, it will constantly yell at me.
Yeah, the early systems were very crude.
My BMW yells at me if I pick my nose. I swear to God. And I
Video or it
apologize.
didn't happen, Leo.
Yeah, it was a scratch. It was a scratch. It yells at me because I guess it. I don't know. It's really interesting how
My wife yells at me if I do that. So.
Yeah, it should.
I've seen some recent research that picking your nose can lead to dementia.
Yeah, I know. Don't go too far up there. Yeah. That's basically the. Okay. So are cars safer? They're safer. We know
they are absolutely safer for occupants than they ever have been.
Are there? Oh, not so good for pedestrians.
They're huge.
Right.
They run down all the people outside them.
Yeah, if you
I
look
walk
at the
by
data,
these trucks all the time where the hood is higher than my head.
If you look at the data from the last decade, since the 1960s, we've been on a steady downward trend for traffic fatality rates, except until the last decade. And what's happened is in the last decade, the occupant fatalities have continued to decline, but pedestrian and cyclist fatalities have increased because everybody's getting into these giant trucks and SUVs and they can't see people. And you've got worse visibility, and it's really
the cars are
terrible.
bigger and heavier too. So if there's contact, the contact is more likely to be destructive.
Yeah.
I saw a headline the other day of, I don't remember where, some girl got hit by a car on her bike and she died. And that hit me like emotionally because I got hit by a car on my bike when I was 14 years old, but it was one of those like big 1980s Buicks. So when I couldn't avoid the car, I went on its hood and I rolled off on the other side and didn't get run over or bounced too hard or something. So, I mean, I didn't see the car and the car didn't see me, but now I would just end up under the car and then I would have no chance.
Yeah. Now you get, people getting hit by Cybertrucks and Raptors and,
I know people who are buying SUVs just for defensive reasons because they just, everybody else car on the road.
It's protecting the people on the inside, but it's killing people on the outside.
What do you make of the, the kind of fighting over whether Tesla is safer than other cars or less safe? I've seen data suggesting it gets into more accidents. And why is that?
The problem is,
I'll tell you why, Larry. It's people like you. It's Tesla drivers.
Well, that's
the
problem.
problem.
That's the answer I'm actually listening to. That's what I wanted to say. Yeah.
I was embarrassed to drive a BMW for a long time because BMW drivers are the worst.
Well, don't get into the political part about it. I'm very embarrassed.
But I've noticed that issue with driving with Teslas on the road, and with all due respect to my friends who drive Teslas, I always noticed there was something kind of absent about the way it was getting driven. It almost seemed like the drivers had just turned over a little bit too much control to the car and just sort of expected the car will make it fine. It's like there's other people on the road. We're busy trying to merge with you. We need we need you to be on the ball. And
but I'm curious if Sam knows why it is that what's behind these reports.
So we've the problem is trying to get valid data, to get apples to apples data, because one of the things Tesla has often put out reports saying, our cars get into 1/4 as many crashes as other cars. But what they don't tell you is it's the classic thing of tell me which side of the argument you're on and I'll give you the statistics to prove you're right. Mm-hmm. In this case, Tesla, we don't know for sure because they don't actually provide any context. They just give a headline number and nothing else. But most likely what they're doing is they are comparing the rate of crashes of their vehicles to the entire vehicle population. And there's 290 million registered vehicles in the United States, with an average age of almost 13 years now.
Oh, okay.
And most of those don't have advanced ADAS systems and other safety features.
Anti-lock brakes.
If you compared Teslas, which 90% of all the Teslas have been built since 2017, so the last 8 years, or actually probably more than 90%.
Yeah.
And they all have these ADAS features. If you compared them only to the population of vehicles built in the same time period, and especially more expensive premium vehicles that tend to have these types of features, the numbers would be very, very different.
Interesting.
Because a lot of the crashes are happening with older vehicles, and when studies have been done trying to make those comparisons like for like comparisons, they have found that Teslas tend to get into more crashes. Yeah. And while it's hard to determine the exact causation, there is certainly a correlation with use of features like autopilot and FSD, where the drivers are not as attentive, and Tesla drivers in general, because they tend to be more tech forward, tend to be more trusting of the technology, and so they're more likely to utilize it perhaps beyond what its true capabilities would justify.
I just always felt like it was an abdication. Like it's not necessarily that they were using the active features, but that they were so convinced about the car being the better driver and that the car will take care of them, that they stopped being as involved with what their role was with the car's operation.
That's true about 98% of the time, but it doesn't take much to kill you.
Well, and the thing is, the vast majority of driving, we don't have crashes. And this is one of the problems around automotive safety has been the way that it's been talked about for so long. Everybody likes to trot out this, 94% of crashes are caused by human error, which is true up to a point. 94% of crashes, human error is the last in a chain of events that led to that crash. Mm-hmm. What you don't hear is that, we drive 3.3 trillion miles a year in the United States alone. That's trillion with a T. And we have about one fatal crash for every 100 million miles of driving. For all crashes, it's about 6.5 million crashes a year, which works out to roughly about one crash every 500,000 miles. Mm-hmm. For average drivers driving 15,000 miles a year, good. That's one crash every 30 years on average. So as much as we, humans are often the last in a chain of events that lead to a crash, we actually are really good at this incredibly complex task. Yeah. Driving is very hard, but we are actually much better at it than we give ourselves credit for.
Is it harder than hitting a baseball?
Yeah, I would say it is.
Okay.
Because there's so many more variables.
That's a silly
question.
By
the way, my homemade bumper sticker says, "I knew he was crazy. I didn't know he was dangerous."
Oh,
I've known he was crazy for a long time.
Yeah.
I think I'm going to send that to Donald Trump. He could put it on the back of his Tesla.
Well, he's getting rid of that, though.
Yeah, apparently he thought, he's going to sell it.
Is he selling his Tesla?
Yeah,
apparently.
he said this week he's going to sell it.
Yeah. I'd love to own that Tesla. I think that'd be a great collector's item.
This is a great, first of all, I doubt very much Donald Trump has ever driven a car in his life, right?
Or walked in the grass with bare feet. I've decided that would explain a lot.
Yeah. Hi, this is Benito. Before we move on from cars, I want to ask Sam something about modern cars right now. Like, why are the headlights getting brighter and brighter?
To try to better illuminate the scene around you.
Not to blind me everywhere I go.
Oh, the better to see you with, my dear.
The ones that see me from behind, they're blinding me into my mirrors. The ones that are coming towards me are blinding me ahead of me. It's like I feel like it's more dangerous.
Yeah, lighting technology has changed a lot. We've gone from incandescents to halogens, and now we're using LED lights, headlights, and they are much brighter. One of the problems that has happened, particularly in the U.S., is our lighting regulations did not keep up with it. For a long time in Europe, they've allowed adaptive lighting systems. So the lights used on a lot of European cars, if you're familiar with like DLP projectors, they work a lot like that. Where you've got the lighting elements, and there's basically mirrors that create the lighting pattern, and it can adjust in real time, using the cameras and other sensors on the vehicle. It can adjust the lighting pattern. So as you're driving, as a car's coming up towards you or you're coming up behind another car, it will automatically lower the beams, so that you're not blinding other cars. They only recently changed that regulation in the U.S., and so far, the first manufacturer to actually implement adaptive headlights like that in the U.S. market is Rivian.
Tesla have it too.
They have the mechanism. They have not. I don't believe they've actually implemented
it very recently.
Okay,
last
maybe,
week.
maybe they have.
I think that's a funny thing because I think my BMW also has it, but it's not on.
Yeah, and a lot of European cars have the hardware, but they haven't enabled it in software yet. The last time I was driving a Rivian a few months back, I was driving at night, and as a car was approaching me, I could see the high beams were on. It was illuminating the entire scene in front of me, and all of a sudden it was basically a notch in the upper left-hand corner.
That's so cool.
You could see the lights go down where that car was, so it wasn't
just
blinding
so you
the
wouldn't
other car.
blind the driver, but you could still see everything going on. We have to take a break. I have lots more stuff. We'll do a speed round because we're almost done. But there's so many big stories this week. Great to have you, Sam Abul Samad, car guy. What's the best self-driving vehicle on the market today?
There is no self-driving vehicle on the market today.
Okay, thank you.
You cannot buy an actual car that will drive itself without human supervision.
What's the next best thing?
GM Super Cruise system.
Okay. There you have the answer. See, I like a definitive answer like that. Thank you, Sam. Kathy Gellis is also here. She talks about the law, so obviously there's no definitive answer ever.
Are you going to ask me, what is the best law?
What's the best law in the world?
Section 230. It's a
yes,
law.
I agree.
Section
like that law,
230. By the way, we're trying to get Mike Masnick on. You write for Tech Dirt, and I love Mike and love your writing. He has vibe coded his own to-do list app, and he's like thrilled with it. So I want to get him on a little bit to talk about it. I think we're going to have to schedule him at a time because he's a busy guy. But very cool what he's done. Anyway, it's great to talk to you, Kathy, and of course, Larry Maggot from connectsafely.org. This week's show brought to you by NetSuite. Hello, NetSuite. It's an interesting time for business. Tariffs and trade policies are dynamic. How about that? Supply chains are squeezed and cash flow, tighter than ever. If your business cannot adapt in real time, you are in a world of hurt. Now more than ever, you need total visibility from global shipments to tariff impacts to real-time cash flow. How do you get it? NetSuite by Oracle, your AI-powered business management suite, trusted by over 41,000 businesses. NetSuite is the #1 cloud ERP, and for a lot of reasons. It brings accounting, financial management, inventory, and HR all into one suite. That means you have one source of truth, giving you the visibility and control you need to make quick decisions. With real-time forecasting, you're peering into the future with actionable data. And with AI embedded throughout, you can automate a lot of these everyday tasks, letting your teams stay strategic. NetSuite helps you know what's stuck, what it's costing you, and how to pivot fast. Don't you need that? It's one system, full control, tame the chaos with NetSuite. If your revenues are at least in the 7 figures, download the free ebook, Navigating Global Trade, 3 Insights for Leaders at netsuite.com/twit. That's netsuite.com/twit. netsuite.com/twit. We thank NetSuite so much for supporting our network. We thank you especially for supporting our network as well, you Club Twit listeners. We have raised the price of Club Twit. First time in 4 years. We felt we kind of had to, what with tariffs and all. No, tariffs don't impact us yet, but they impact a lot of our advertisers. And so we thought, $10 is still a pretty good deal. You get all the shows plus all the content we do in the club, all of it ad-free. You get access to the Club Twit Discord. The keynotes are all in the club now. Tomorrow, we're going to do the WWDC keynote. Micah Sargent and I will start 10 a.m. Pacific in the club. So you have to be in the club to watch our coverage and in the Club Twit Discord. The good news is that means the Discord can also participate in our coverage. So we'll have your thoughts and your chat and your takes and all of this as we go. And because we're doing it in the club, we're also going to bring our lunch have a roundtable conversation in the break, and then cover the other keynote, which we never covered before, the State of the Union keynote that follows at 1 o'clock Pacific tomorrow afternoon. So a full day of Apple coverage for club members. If you're not
and
a
Leo,
member,
you're not importing podcasts from China. I just want to be clear about that.
No, we are not.
Okay.
No tariffs.
Save some money, you know.
How would you? I don't know how you would do tariffs on intellectual property.
That's
I don't
a really
know.
good question.
They're
Actually,
working
that's
on
a
it, I'm
major.
sure.
That's a major issue that Trump is not thinking about and should be.
Twit.tv/clubtwit. We will not charge you a tariff.
Actually, I think the bigger issue is I think he did try to do something along those lines. And
with movies, right?
With movies. And there is text that says, no, you don't get to do it with that type of material. But it was tried.
I noticed that got dropped like a hot potato.
I think it had to be. I mean, there's degrees of illegality of various things that are attempted, but some of them are running into some very explicit language saying, no, you can't do that to this.
And how would you, even logistically, could you tariff movies?
Well, and it was also a really bad idea that would have really hurt Hollywood in a very direct way, where like China would have been like, okay, well, we'll not use your stuff. And it was
sure deal.
Yeah, there were a lot of issues.
Yeah. So far, no tariffs on podcasts. Although I have to say, it is very confusing that Oracle ad, it really underscores it. Lisa wants to order some jewelry from France. She said, well, what's the tariff on France? I said, I think it's 25%. I actually had to go look it up. It was 25%, but it's temporarily paused until later in July. So it's 10% right now, but it's
so what does Oracle do? Do they query a database or Trump's brain, or how do they?
I don't know how they. I asked. I'll be honest. I asked Perplexity. I hope it was right. Perplexity AI. Yeah. Hey, here's one area of confusion that might be cleared up thanks to Microsoft: USB-C cables. For crying out loud, you never know what that cable's capable of, what that port is for. Microsoft at least is trying to do their bit. They have something called the Windows Hardware, what is it? WHCP. I can't remember what it stands for. But if you're a PC manufacturer, you want to be WHCP approved. And Microsoft says, okay, if you want that, you're going to have to label your ports. They're going to have to work in a certain way, and you will have to advertise it in a certain way. Here is the USB-C WHCP requirements. This chart itself is confusing, but at least you'll know you're going to get this as a minimum, okay? It's amazing that this is the Windows Hardware Compatibility Program. There it is. It's amazing that we haven't had anything like this until now. There's no consistency at all. It's been driving people crazy. It's nuts. Continuing the speed round, Walmart is going to expand its drone delivery to 100 stores. Get ready. You will see Walmart drones making deliveries in Atlanta, Charlotte, Houston, Orlando, Tampa. They're already doing it in Dallas and Bentonville, Arkansas, the hometown of Walmart.
Well, they land in your backyard, or what do they?
I think they drop it by a cable. They're working with the drone startup Zipline. That kind of tells you what they're going to do. Yeah. Amazon is really only doing it in 2 sites. So in fact, they paused drone deliveries for 2 months, citing safety issues.
And Zelensky is doing it as well, but not with presence.
It's being used to good effect in disaster areas to get medicines to people. That makes a lot of sense. Yeah. I don't know. Walmart deliveries, I don't know. We'll see. Get ready. Look up in the sky.
I live near an airport, so I don't even think they can legally fly in my neighborhood.
Yeah, you might not be able to. You might have to actually get in the car and drive down to your local Walmart. If you do, would you pick up a Nintendo Switch for me?
Sure.
It is hard to find them. Walmart has them. Target has them. The Switch 2 has reportedly beaten the record for the most sold-out console within 24 hours. It came out on Thursday. It's on track to shatter the 2-month record, 3 million units on launch day. One of the most successful hardware releases of all times.
Has Microsoft sold 3 million Xbox Ones yet?
No, you're being mean now. You're just being mean. The Buzzy launch, according to Bloomberg, drew long lines at retailers like Walmart, Target, Best Buy, and GameStop. Here, USA Today has some pictures of people sitting. This is like the iPhone. When the iPhone came out, these are people outside a Best Buy store waiting for midnight so they could buy the Switch 2.
Yeah, there are actually a lot of people on my feeds this weekend being like, wow, it feels like 2010 again. They were like excited to wait out in line for a midnight launch. It was weird.
Yeah,
did you, Benito? Did you wait? Did you wait to get
I did not.
Switch?
I did not, no.
On the Engadget
want
podcast this week, Devendra was talking about he went to a midnight launch at his local Best Buy, I think, or somewhere.
Good for Devendra.
Yeah, he couldn't get a pre-order, so he went to the midnight line.
This reminds me so much of 2007 when people would, come out of the store. I got it. I got one.
Yeah, I was covering that, and it was phenomenal watching that.
There was also the Nintendo store had just opened downtown recently, so there was stuff happening down there too.
Okay, look, he's got one. There's musicians playing at a FNAC Darty store. I don't know what FNAC Darty is during the launch.
French store.
Oh,
FNAC and Darty.
If I say it that way.
I didn't realize it was the same store. They must have merged, but those are two big stores in France.
Here are Mario and Luigi dancing. That's in Paris also.
Paris, France.
France, not Texas.
Yeah.
I don't know. Does anybody in our chat have?
Anthony says he got one. Anthony got one.
He says his brother got one. Oh, and Anthony got one too?
Yeah.
Anthony, I'm very jelly. You're going to have to come over. He got it with a pre-order on Walmart. Nintendo, in order to avoid scalpers, actually did, I think, a pretty good thing. They may have also created this frenzy by saying you can't pre-order it unless you've had a Nintendo account prior to the end of last year and more than 50 hours using your Switch.
Wow.
That's a good question. I wonder, how did the scalpers get any? That's a good question.
Well, I'm sure they did.
But it doesn't seem like a big thing. I don't see an outcry right now. Yeah.
No.
It sounds almost like a loyalty program. If you're a loyal, heavy user, you get rewarded.
Yeah.
It makes sense, right? Yeah. Let me just
That's like buying a Ferrari. Ferrari won't sell you a Ferrari unless you've previously bought a couple of Ferraris.
The only reason I didn't buy one last week. That's the only reason. Right, what about
Let me see if I can get... Okay, here's a Nintendo Switch 2 on eBay, brand new, sealed, in hand, ready to ship. It's only $200 over retail. Here's what actually only $100 over retail.
I mean, maybe some of it is people who are like, woohoo, I can get one. Did some private speculation as opposed to, I bought one for all the kids. Oh, they bought their own.
So they are on eBay, but you're going to pay $100 to $200 more.
It's not like the double
pre-orders.
It's not the double
pre-orders
that
scalpers stores.
Buy them for below retail.
I'm sorry, Benito. What did you say?
It's not the double that scalpers usually charge when they get a hold of all the stock.
Yeah. And I tried to sign up, and I guess I didn't have the requisite 50 hours on my old Switch, but I signed up for the Mario Kart World Bundle and all that too. It would have been fun. Maybe someday I'll get one. Anthony, you'll have to tell us how you like it. Have you played with it? But tariff worries might have been an issue. Nintendo prepared for that by raising the cost up front. So, this kind of merges Kathy's interests and Sam's. You cannot name your car Eleanor?
No. Eleanor, the car is. Let me not say the character.
It's from the movie Gone in 60 Seconds.
In the movie Gone in 60 Seconds, in that whole franchise, there is a recurrence of a car referred to as Eleanor.
Yes.
Of course, in all these movies, Eleanor looks quite different. Like sometimes it's yellow, sometimes it's silver, and sometimes it's new and shiny, and sometimes it's old and dirty and broken. Anyway, this is I wrote a post on Tector about a court case from last week or the week before where the Ninth Circuit said, Eleanor is not a copyrightable character. You can't stop other people from using a car and calling it Eleanor.
Why not? You could copyright one of the cars in the Cars movie.
So the why not goes back to, so character copyright is a really weird and pretty stupid area of copyright, because normally copyright is you can copyright the expression of something, but you can't copyright the idea of something.
Right.
If you could do the latter, you would be able to I had this idea that inspired this, and you could cut off everybody else from being able to express something with the same inspiration. But the problem with characters is you kind of have that thing where if a character emerges in a copyrighted work, not only is the work copyrightable, but potentially the character as well. So for instance, like Sherlock Holmes, when the Sherlock Holmes stories were copyrighted, were still under copyright, nobody could use Sherlock Holmes because Sherlock Holmes was a character that also had its own copyright. Roughly speaking, there's a little bit around the edges, but so that was what was happening. But then there had been a case in, I think, 2008, where somebody had sued over whether Eleanor the car could qualify as a copyrightable character. Now, unlike the characters in the movie Cars, which were personified and had personalities and did things and stuff like
characters.
that, where they were personified and they functioned like personified characters. They just happened to have had automotive form. Eleanor the car never really had a personality. It just sort of had characteristics. And a court then said, that's enough. You get your copyright in Eleanor the car. Then years later, there was another case where somebody sued for copyright infringement. Well, DC Comics sued for copyright infringement in the Batmobile because there was a guy who was making life-size models of the Batmobile, and DC Comics managed to sue. And there's a lot wrong with that particular lawsuit. But one of the problems was this idea that the Batmobile was a copyrightable character, given that it looks different in every movie and every comic that it shows up. There's no consistency to the Batmobile. It has no personality. It just sort of is a stylized prop that keeps showing up in a vaguely reminiscent, stylized way. But there was a case called DC Comics versus, I don't know how to pronounce it, TOWLE, which said, if Eleanor the car was copyrighted or copyrightable, then there's really no reason that the Batmobile shouldn't have been copyrightable as well. But now the people who were suing each other over the Eleanor the car, they had a settlement agreement, and the settlement agreement went out the window. So they sued each other again. And now it's led to the Ninth Circuit saying, that's nuts. There's no way this is copyrightable. So they have this decision using a test that the DC Comics case had actually come up with, and said it fails all three prongs of this test. It's not distinctive enough. It's not persistent enough.
There were
I'm
four
summarizing.
different Eleanors, four different colors, and four different Gone in 60-second films. Carroll Shelby Licensing was suing Denise Halicki, saying that Halicki's copyright claims over the Eleanor Ford Mustangs were invalid. Halicki countersued, saying Shelby's GT500 CR Mustangs infringed her copyright in Eleanor. I don't know who won. I don't know
who won is the people who want to be able to use another Mustang and call it Eleanor the car.
Any Mustang and name it Eleanor.
There is not enough in Eleanor the car that would qualify for copyright in Eleanor the car, even if the movies that it appeared in are still under copyright. So it's a good decision. It dials back copyrightability in characters, particularly for these inanimate objects that are really nothing but props. But meanwhile, the Batmobile case is still on the books, and arguably that was a huge injustice, and it was predicated a little bit on in pretty significant amount on this earlier case that's now been completely undone.
If you copyrighted the Batmobile, you would be just copyrighting the name, because which Batmobile would you copy?
Don't bring logic into it. The court there didn't. And you're talking about if you're copywriting just the name, that's really a trademark. So maybe there would be some issues with trademark infringement, but no, the Batmobile case was a copyright case where a guy, you modeled it off of two of the Batmobiles that appeared in movies that DC Comics had only licensed to the movie makers. So they didn't even design those particular cars for those movies. It was really, it's a screwed up case, but a lot of it
was that from the Tim Burton movies or the 60s Batmobile?
I think it was the Tim Burton ones. I'm not
a reasonable presumption of confusion. For example, I always thought it was interesting that Madonna.
No, that matters for trademark. It doesn't matter for copyright.
Yeah, because Madonna protected her name, but the Catholic Church had it a long time before she did.
Well, yeah.
There was one Madonna before you that really even arguably was better known.
That is trademark. And although I recently had to do a project where I was reading a lot about character copyright, and trademark is supposed to be distinctive from copyright and operate on a different axis with a different rationale. But it does appear that if there is consumer confusion, that does seem to end up informing the copyright analysis, even though it's not supposed to.
Wasn't that the whole Apple Music versus Apple Computer dispute? Because
that was trademark, though.
When Apple got into the music business,
they made a deal.
Got upset.
I learned a little bit about something called reverse confusion, which is apparently something you can really get some damages for. We got a little tussle with Twitter over the name Twit, and we proceeded. Twit came first, then there was Twitter, and the problem is reverse confusion, which is that people would assume we copied Twitter, which is more damaging to us than even the fact that our name was, copied. So. Apparently that's the one you got to really watch out for.
Yeah.
You know what else we want to watch out for in the skies over Sonoma? Not Walmart drones, the county drones. In our county, apparently, and by the way, I have to say I have a little connection to this because the guy who's doing it is a buddy of mine, JT Wick. He's the director of Permit Sonoma, the county's land use and planning department. He's being sued right now. They sent drones in the sky to look for pot farms, which apparently is okay. But then they started to find like little, violations of code at residential properties.
There's a word that is really important for this analysis. This is a Fourth Amendment issue.
Yeah,
and case law has gotten kind of weak on this point. But the key word is a word called curtilage, which has to do with what part of the property is visible from overhead. Well,
apparently, they have issued citations to people for having illegal horse operations. There's a woman who says that. She says she noticed a drone hovering over her farm. She's deaf, so she didn't hear it. Somebody else said, what's that drone doing up there? At which point she ran inside her bedroom where she could see the drone photographing the property through her blind. She was looking out. They weren't looking in. She said she feared that the drone may have photographed her earlier while nude after bathing. So she's also part of the lawsuit. I'm afraid to open my blinds or go outside because she's deaf. She wouldn't even know there's a drone overhead. Mm-hmm. Who knows if the county drone could be spying on me? A second plaintiff said the county used the drone program to photograph her horse stable and issue code violations. The only way she found out, the county employee mentioned they had photos of her property. She filed a public records request. This is why these are so important, by the way, which left her stunned, according to the San Francisco Chronicle, after seeing the county employees were monitoring her private property, including photographing her outdoor bathtub and shower.
Hey, Kathy, how legal is it to shoot these out of the sky?
Is it?
Probably not legal at all, but in terms of pure constitutional theory about what is okay and what is not okay, don't do it because somebody's going to get you with some sort of code and statute violation.
Can I train crows to attack it? How about that?
Yes. I could definitely do that.
What about radio
I don't
jamming?
know if the drone is in your yard that incessantly.
That's a good question.
Then
radio jamming. How about that?
Yeah. What about
Kathy?
radio jamming?
That's a good question.
Okay. I am a lawyer. I'm not your lawyer. None of this is legal advice. But this is all very dystopian. And one of the things that is an issue is that, Fourth Amendment law and other related laws were sort of developing. And then as technology hit them, sometimes they kind of veered off and started to develop in ways that were not necessarily protective of individual rights. They tended to defer a little bit more to the state action. I wonder if those are going to get rethought in some way. But in the meantime, I don't pick that fight with the state, I don't think.
It sure sounds like mission creep. But if I were a resident of Sonoma, if it's Sonoma County,
Yeah.
I would go to my board of supervisors
I'm a
and
resident.
say, "Hey, wait a minute."
Yeah.
Stick to platforms.
I think
that out
I think
there,
to
I
some
hear.
extent that is the way to do it, because right now it's a political solution will take care of this. But for the people who've got citations, they could potentially challenge them on a Fourth Amendment basis. The case law, I'm not enough of a Fourth Amendment expert. I know that, like, I took some classes in law school. There, curtilage is a word that will be relevant to the dispute, but
is that when you have like a gallon of milk for a little too long and it curtilages? Is that what you're talking about?
I don't think you should.
Don't make cheese
milk is
out
not
of it. Is
going to
that what you're
help
saying?
anything here. So,
Okay.
But it'll impress people that you know the term.
That's why I'm basically offering it to everybody.
How do you
I
spell
can't give
that?
you the Fourth Amendment
area of
analysis,
land
but
around
here's
a
a nice
house.
fancy word.
An area
I think
of land
it
around a
is.
house informing one enclosure with it. That's according to some dictionary online.
Just consult with your own attorney and mention the word curtilage and say, here, I heard this word.
All right. So the
we
word
do
with
with it?
curtilage is, I remember being taught a case where curtilage mattered when I was in law school. So damn it, it needs to matter now. But it's a lot of stuff in terms of the surveillance you can do with technology. We already had the development of Fourth Amendment law, and then we added technology to it. And sometimes you would end up with some case law that would be very protective of the liberty interest. Like Justice Scalia wrote a case called Kilo. I think that's what it was, which involved, like, could you use like a heat gun on a house to like surveil what was going on in the house. And he had said no, but that was sort of like the opening volley. And then there's been a lot of creep where the courts increasingly have said yes and yes and yes to more technological surveillance. And maybe we need to start seeing a snap back to, hang on a second, the liberty interests here were pretty important, and this is going to be a problem if we keep saying yes to it.
Especially with cameras literally everywhere today. I mean,
Yeah.
Well,
I want to thank you all for allowing me to learn a little bit of law here today. It's been a great time. Thank you, Larry Magid. Yeah. Everybody should go to connectsafely.org. We didn't get to your story about AI PCs, but I think that would be well worth reading if people go to larrysworld.com, a laptop built for AI, but how long? Oh, this was from the Merc.
Yeah.
Oh, nice. All right. Yeah. Thank you, Larry. Appreciate it. What would you like to plug? Anything?
Well, I was going to say I'd ask my attorney about curtilage, but it would probably cost me $1,000 for him to look it up.
Guarantee.
You can
just ask ChatGPT. That's what I did.
Those of you who are worried about your kids and the apps they're using, go to Connect Safely and click on Explore by App and read about those apps. Read our parents' guides, because we can't solve all your problems. We can at least tell you what they offer, what controls are there. Maybe we can assuage some of your fears or create new fears you haven't even thought of yet. But you know, it's a way to educate yourself.
Very nice. It's great to see you, Larry. Thank you
My
for
pleasure.
being here. The number 8th most visited podcast guest. Or maybe you're 7. Maybe you're moving up on the charts.
I hope so.
Yeah. Thank you, Larry. Kathy Gellis, soon to be on the top of the charts. We love having you on. She writes for Tech Dirt, and you can find her at cgcounsel, COUNSEL.com. Anything you want to plug, Kathy?
Not currently, but lots of Tech Dirt posts and hopefully lots more soon.
Love what you do on Tech Dirt. Really appreciate it. And of course, Sam my car guy. We got to do a club event about cars. If you would like to do that sometime, we'll schedule it.
Absolutely.
Because I think a lot of people miss you on the radio show, and we don't get to talk cars as much as I'd like to. For instance, I wanted to ask you about that $20,000 truck that doesn't have a radio or anything else in it. Maybe that'd be a good subject. And there are plenty of others. Car people love to talk about cars. So let's get that on the books, okay?
Sounds good.
His podcast, wheelbearings.media, with Nicole and Robbie, and it's a great show. You must listen if you love cars. And he is a VP of research at Telemetry. I want to thank all.
Do another podcast now too, a short daily 2-minute hit every day called the Telemetry Transportation Daily.
Oh, that's cool.
Yeah.
Is that for people in the biz, or would anybody be interested?
Anybody who's interested in the auto industry or vehicles might. I mean, it's only 2 minutes. Give it a listen. You might find it interesting. Might get some useful insights out of it.
What a good idea! So it's just like a quick update.
Yep.
On what's happening. I'm gonna have to listen.
Yeah.
Is it available everywhere?
It's available everywhere. Ignore that. I used one of the. I think I used Gemini or ChatGPT or something to generate
to write your feed.
Some JavaScript code to put an embedded player in there, and it was working for a while. But I think maybe the proxy that it was using to generate the player feed wasn't working. But you can find it in Apple Podcasts. Overcast. It's everywhere. Just Telemetry Transportation Daily. It's out there.
Very nice.
Yeah.
Congratulations. That's great. Thank you, Sam. Thank you, Kathy. Thank you, Larry. Thanks to all of you for joining us, especially our Club Twit members who make this show possible every week. Don't forget, tomorrow, big day for Apple fans. The Apple WWDC, the Worldwide Developers Conference, convenes. We will have coverage in the Club Twit Discord for both keynotes, the morning keynote that's open to the public and the State of the Union keynote following. Micah Sargent and I will be talking about what's new with Apple. It should be interesting to see how little they mention AI after getting all that egg on their face by overdoing it last year. We'll be watching with great interest. We do Twit, as I mentioned, every Sunday, 2 to 5 p.m. Pacific. You can get the show live or get it after the fact. There's also a YouTube channel for the video, but the best way, of course, to subscribe is in your favorite podcast player. Leave us a 5-star review if you would. Let the world know about the longest running and I think best tech podcast in the world. Thank you, everybody. We'll see you next time. As I've said for the last 20 years, another Twit is in the can. Bye-bye.
This is amazing.
Doing the Twit.